Hello. Thanks for dropping in. Today we're checking out some tactics games with a fantasy theming. We've been doing a lot of fantasy games last couple of months, and then I'm going to put a stop to it. Well, we'll see. We'll see. But we've been on kind of that theme generally. We've got a couple of tactics-based games today. One of them I think is more of a real-time thing, but we'll see once we get in there. And I've changed the schedule around a little bit, so there will be different games in than in the original title of this stream, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But just a couple of housekeeping things. Anyone who's interested in taking part in Collab Jam, which is our collaborative game jam, running from the 3rd of May for 2 weeks. The itch page is up now, so if you're watching this back on the VOD, you can check that out in the description. I've done a longer video introducing it. Most of the information about that game jam is up on the itch page now. However, there will be a theme or restriction that comes in, which will be announced on May the 2nd, it says here. So just a few hours before the game jam starts, we'll announce the theme, the kind of additional rule for the game jam. That is already queued up to go on my Patreon. You can see there's this scheduled post on Patreon for May the 2nd. I will post it on itch on the same day. I will post it on YouTube on the same day. I will post it as many places as I can think to post it, so that no one misses out on that rule, because this restriction is going to have some elements that if you don't follow them, your game will get disqualified, and then you won't be eligible to like win the game jam or to even be voted on in the game jam. And I'm going to be quite strict on that stuff this year, because every time I run a game jam, there's a bunch of people that just try and like do something that's not in the spirit of the game jam. And I don't think it's fair on all of the people that engage properly and play each other's games and vote to make them have to like sift through loads of stuff that wasn't made specifically for the game jam, or didn't really take on board like the learning goal of the game jam. Because, you know, as someone who's been making games for a long time now and working in games education for a decade now, on and off, you know, teaching sometimes, working in studios other times, when I set up a game jam, it has a specific learning goal based on what I've seen people struggle with, and that's based on my time teaching in university. It's based on my own experience of like growing up, you know, haphazardly making games as a hobby, and it's based on all of the stuff that I see from doing these streams and seeing what people are most weak at. So if I put a really seemingly very harsh restriction on the game jam, there's a good reason, and it's to make sure that people are practicing the skills that I see most lacking in the game development community, or at least the people that submit their games to this channel. So yeah. Thank you to everyone who's joined the stream today, and let me know the context of how you're watching. I will be looking back into the stream into the chat as we start the first game. If you're watching on the VOD, let me know how you watch these, because I'd like to think you're kind of sneakily listening to this at your day job or something, and not watching it instead of doing game dev, because that's the challenge with doing a channel like this that puts out so much content and does so many live streams, is I worry that people are doing it instead of working on their games. So hopefully this is your like second monitor type content, and you're still being productive in some way, or you're sneaking it in while you're doing something where you can't work on your game. You can just watch anything if you work from home. So yeah, thanks for joining. Let me know what your deal is, how you're watching today, and I'll just take you through the games we were meant to play. So we had Heroes of Magic and Cards, which I still think is a pretty bad name, Blood and Chaos, and Lootbane. We're still going to be checking out Lootbane, but we're going to be checking out alongside Northanda Chronicles and Deck Tactics. One of those is an itch game, and both the other two are on Steam. Where has my Steam gone? Let me just make sure that I've got the press download on that. So the reason I'm not playing the other two now, these two games might have been submitted a long time ago, but I went to check Heroes of Magic and Cards this morning, and it's already been released. Now I don't know if they sent it to me after it was released and they didn't tick the box to say, hey, I shouldn't have sent you this game because it's already released, but we're not going to check that one out. If you want to go and have a look at it, you can yourself. It's kind of reasonably polished pixel art game that is doing Slay the Spire combat using a traditional hand of cards. I don't really know how that works. It looks very polished. The art style kind of reminds me a little bit of Dungeons and Degenerate Gamblers, but yeah, I don't stream games on this stream that have had a commercial release, so that one's not going to get played. Blood and Chaos, really nice looking kind of trad. Well, I was going to say trad roguelike, but it looks like we've got a party-based thing as well. But this one was sent to me with an itch demo that is no longer online, and they haven't put the Steam demo up. So I just can't play that today, which is a shame, because this one I was a little bit more excited for. It looks, I don't know, this looks like a labor of love. This one kind of feels a bit like a commercial studio has done it. It's kind of very, very polished, and I don't know if that's because I feel like I've seen this style of assets before as well. But this is very, very polished, and so I don't feel too much of a like we've missed out by not seeing this one. But Blood and Chaos I would have really liked to see, because this looks like a kind of genuine small-scale indie game. But that's fine. We're going to check out Northanda Chronicles and Deck Tactics as our replacers, and then we'll check out Lootbane as well. And we're going to check out Deck Tactics first, because I think this will be the smaller thing. A narrative-driven tactical roguelike deck builder RPG where every card becomes a key to reshaping a storybook world. That's an impressive set of words, but it's also kind of an alarm bell set of words, because when people say narrative and deck builder together, those things can feel like they're clashing. It could be very interesting if they're not. I mean, if you've ever played Reigns, I think Reigns is almost technically a deck builder, although most people wouldn't think of it that way. Reigns is this game where you manage a kingdom by swiping left and right, like using the Tinder interface to do a kind of kingdom management game. But that was very well written and had like professional writers on it, and I'm always wary of narrative focused indie games that are trying to do too many things. But let's see how it plays out. This is one of the ones I grabbed at the last minute to replace the 2 games that couldn't be played. Deck Tactics Summoner's Guide. Start, Compendium, quit. Okay. That's lovely. Long ago, before monsters even sprouted from the ground, the world was engulfed by an endless dark sea. Okay, so you've got a typo in the first sentence. It pressed in from every side, patient and cold. The elders said it came because people had forgotten how to live a true life, and the sea... Okay, I'm not going to read all of this. Let's just get to the gameplay, please. We've got a Final Fantasy wizard, the Fair Slope. My legs trembled and my mouth felt dry. The climb up Fair Hill was made worse by the sun pressing down without mercy. The occasional breeze offered brief relief, though even that came and went as it pleased. As I trudged up, the hill seemed to stretch endlessly before me, its rough path a quiet test of will. I wondered, as I looked up the clear blue sky, if heading to Labyrinth City was worth the trouble, especially after nearly dying to a monstrous pit with 1,000 teeth. Okay. Okay, fine. I mean, that's a lot of sentences to say. It was hard to climb up the hill. I was on my way to Labyrinth City. I like that, especially after nearly dying to a monstrous pit with 1,000 teeth, because words, the power of words is like half describing things where the reader has to do the rest of the work in their head. So when you describe, like half describe a monster, that can be quite powerful at generating horror, because the person isn't like actually visually seeing the thing and then they have to create it in their mind, and that's quite scary. Like 3 sentences to describe how arduous it is to walk up a hill is not a great way to get me into your fiction of your game, I don't think. A woman in white robes passed by, patting my back as she went. Mary, one of my saviours, had pulled me from the jaws of death not long ago. Despite her small frame, she had sunk that terrible abomination with magic that shook the earth. I really want to see what the game is before... Is that it? Was that That was what that thing on the map was. It was just a sort of choose your own adventure thing. Are they all going to be like this? Okay, we've got a combat now. I think this game, I think there's something like, I know I'm being like dismissive and skipping a lot of stuff here. And that's because I want to get to the gameplay. And that's because when people send me their games, I assume you understand that I'm a game designer and I'm not here to read the story. So when I know like lots of you who watch this regularly will think, oh, he really skips through the story a lot. And it's like, yeah, it's not because I personally hate story. Some of my favorite games are story games, but I want to get to the gameplay as quickly as possible because the way I see it is that when people play a game, they come to play a game, and that's what we're here to review and look at. So if it takes a long time to get to the gameplay, that starts to ring alarm bells for me because it means that you're so in love with your storytelling that you're kind of putting so much of it before anyone gets to actually play the gameplay portion of your game. And that's something that makes me feel a little bit wary because you would have to be like a professional storyteller for me to think that that is a good way for you to structure a game. And the games where it works are games where the game is entirely about the story and, you know, inhabiting a character. So your Disco Elysiums, you know, like a Fire Emblem game can get away with having 40 minutes of dialogue before you get to do a battle because it has such a strong brand power and because it's kind of half in that visual novel kind of area. This has got a lot of text, not a lot of pictures to kind of weigh against them. And now if we enter the battle section of the game and it's good, that's going to make it almost worse for me in a way, because I'll think like the way that this game is structured is I've got to click through lots of bad writing. And I'm saying that with like kid gloves on, like bad writing, scare quotes, but we did see an error in the first sentence that we were shown, right? So there's just a sort of imbalance here in how much emphasis is being put on the storytelling. And if the gameplay now ends up being really good, then my advice is going to end up being like, you need to reduce the amount of text in this game by about 75% because people are just going to be hammering to click through it to get to the gameplay. And those things might be at odds with each other in a way that's like just really kind of unsatisfying and doesn't meet the kind of needs of someone that has come to play this type of game. Because, you know, I picked it out for this stream because it was listed as a tactical deck builder. And if I'd have read all of that text, it probably would have taken us 10 minutes to get to this point where we get to do some gameplay and see what the game is. Yeah, Loop Hero is a really good reference point, I think, actually, because, I mean, Loop Hero doesn't actually tell you much as well. So what those kind of games do is they use their narrative moments to just sow seeds of intrigue rather than to actually exposit what characters are doing in the world, right? And that's a great way to do narrative in a game and to sort of suggest a bigger world without kind of trudging along talking to you about what the player character is doing, because the gameplay should be what the player character is doing. Okay, so is that an enemy? Is that what I'm fighting, or is that my guy? I think that's something attacking me and this is my guy. I'm just assuming because blue is a friendly colour and red is a unfriendly colour. And we've got a lot of health here and that doesn't have a lot of health, so... That's trying to attack us this way, maybe? Okay, I'll just click end because I can't work out how anything works. So, this is an enemy moving around doing stuff. This is my guy. Oh, I can move it now. So that attacks in like a sort of 4 compass points type of way. I wonder if I can attack and then move. Like, can I attack and then move out of its range? Because that's going to open up quite a lot of space to do different types of turns. Yeah, I can only attack after I move, which is a shame because... if I'm next to a melee character and I attack, they can always attack me the next turn. Whereas if the move and attack actions are kind of like interchangeable, then I could attack and then move away. Hi, Chris. Today's are supposed to all be tactics games. I don't know if they're going to be because I had to change a bunch of games at the last minute. Okay, that time I could attack and then move away. I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure what the restrictions are on what I can do. I think I need to click my character every time when I want to move them or when I want to attack. The UX isn't super clear. And I think this is just a classic case of like the developer has rushed to make every part of a game in their game. And what they should have probably done is just make that chess-like board game part and keep testing it with people until everything in it was really intuitive and not add any kind of meta progression or story to the game until they'd done that. But they've kind of rushed to make everything, every part of the game, sort of like unilaterally pushed towards a finished game. And that means that the core of the game, the actual gameplay bit, isn't very intuitive. And you could say, oh, there wasn't a tutorial for it or whatever, but I don't think that's necessarily the problem. I think when I'm clicking around and just trying to work out what the mouse does in different contexts, it's not super clear what my clicks are doing in terms of selecting things, deselecting things, changing what mode they're in. All of that kind of stuff is not very clear. So please take all of this, you know, this is very transferable advice for any sort of game. Your game does not need story, it does not need a progression system until the core thing that the player is actually doing is very intuitive based on playtests. Summoner, attack. Reserve pile, summoner, champion. Can't see what on this is supposed to be interactive. Upgrade point 0. Okay, confirm. So this is a card that I have, which is my hero. This is all of the information about it. And I don't have any other cards. So you're sort of introducing me to a menu that doesn't really do anything yet, because it doesn't have... Oh, that's my champion. Okay, I've got the summoner and the champion. And they both have a deck of cards. So that we've got... I think the way this works is we've got characters on a grid, and they can both have a deck of 9 cards that allow them to do different stuff when they move around. And in that first fight, I only had Old Starseeker, who is my summoner's dog, on the field, and it didn't have any cards, and that meant that all it could do was move and attack. I think that's what's going on here. So it's kind of like we're doing a sort of old school Final Fantasy type tactics RPG thing with a little party of characters, but each of them has a deck of cards, and that provides a little bit more variation than just doing Pokemon spam the save move. So I think everything here, in terms of like the parts of a game, is very serviceable and could work. It's just, I think the developer has spent a lot of time on story and polish before the kind of central system of the game is very intuitive and right. I mean, it's not a tutorial, no, it's loads of story that I don't really want to read in this context because I don't care about it yet. I think you really, really need to let players work out whether the gameplay is for them before you start introducing loads of story. And they're trying to integrate the story in the deck building here. So I'm supposed to read the story, make a decision about what my character does, and then maybe that has some impact on my deck. But this is just way too much reading for someone who wants to play a tactics game most of the time. Like I said, if your reference point is something like Fire Emblem, then that's going to give you a bad sense of what an indie game player is going to want, because Fire Emblem has such a strong brand power that it can do things that are effectively, in most cases, bad game design, because there are people that will just play every Fire Emblem because they love those games. As a small indie developer, you don't have that benefit, I don't think, and people that want to play a kind of into the breach, moving stuff around on a board, tactics game, are not going to want to read this much stuff, and that's why I'm not reading it right now, because we're not here to like do a workshop on narrative design or story writing. Okay, so I can put Starseeker on the board. We've got these blobby things. Yeah, Pokemon, but making all the actions cards is a good idea. I can't remember what the. There was a really nice little polished pixel art card game that had that, where you had a little party of two characters, and every time one took a turn, you just got to pick one of two cards from their deck, and you played one and discarded one. It was really good. And you know, I rag on Pokemon a lot, but it is really just the fact that if the possible actions are the same every time, and there's no spatial element, there's just not a lot of depth to the tactical combat in those games. It doesn't mean I hate turn-based games or that I hate the idea of collecting creatures or whatever. I just think Pokemon was essentially a game for children, and all of the design was pushed towards making it about the collecting and the upgrading, so that the decisions within the individual combat encounters didn't really matter. And the reason I bring that up so much when we're looking at indie games is that the audience for smaller indie games, generally speaking, is adults who are quite intelligent. And that means you can't make something using design patterns that were meant to like entertain 10-year-olds, which is the problem with Pokemon type stuff. This feels like there's potentially quite a lot of depth to it. It's very similar to the deck builder that we looked at yesterday, the kind of Norse, spooky Norse one, which really interesting. One of our community members who is like actually a Magic the Gathering artist and has put lots of their art into this other deck builder. It's a similar thing, like a chess-like grid, and then you move it around, move stuff around, and manipulate it with cards. The problem I'm having is a lot of the time I click, okay, we've got like different modal stuff. So I can click on this card and then I can click where to play it, and I can click on him and he goes into move mode. So I can, in theory, I can look at that and I can say, okay, that does a ram and that goes like a gap and then 3. So if there's a way I can line up the enemies, I can ram them and hurt 2 of them at once, which is quite cool. Bite is just a directly adjacent attack. Paralyzing stare has to be right next to them. So I need to move my character and like use them, move them, and then play something else. Now I can't play ram, and I think that's because that costs an AP. So that costs an AP, which is like a yellow square, and I've used all 3 of them by moving. Okay, so an AP is used to play these cards that have an AP cost. The bite doesn't have an AP cost, and moving a square costs an AP as well. Got it. Now we understand the basics of the game. I'm really not sure why so much time has been spent on writing so much story for this game when we don't have a tutorial for this stuff. I don't even necessarily think it needs a tutorial yet, because you want to make sure that people really understand the game and the game is fixed in what you're trying to do with it before you spend ages on a tutorial. But it seems like a strange order of doing things. Okay, we're going to do paralyzing stare on that guy so that he can't attack. I'm assuming that's what paralyze means. I'm going to do a bite on them as well, and I'm going to do the other bite. We're going to use our last AP to move over here. What I really want is to get them lined up so I can ram them together. And so what we're seeing of the combat here so far is quite well designed. We've got a relatively limited set of moves, so it's not overwhelming. I've only got bite, paralyzing stare, and ram. And like I kind of repeatedly find myself saying about deck builders, don't start your deck off with too many different things in. Have duplicates of things, because that will prevent the player from getting overwhelmed with how much stuff they can do. This is good. Like everything we see here is good at the moment. It doesn't teach itself, which is not the end of the world. But yeah, the kind of UX of how you click on things and order them around is a little bit confusing initially. Right, we're going to leave him there. I love the fact that we have a chess set in a spell book as well. That feels really thematically nice. There's a lot of really nice bits of kind of creative thought gone into a lot of aspects of this. I keep forgetting that Ram uses my movement points, so it's very hard to position myself in a way that allows me to use the Ram. So I have to kind of wait until they're directly lined up. But one thing that's nice about this starting deck is that it is already, you can see kind of the gears in my head working as a player when I'm deliberately trying to manipulate the board to get the Ram lined up, right? So like here, I can do it, but I can't actually get this guy because he's too close, so I can... But the starting deck has enough kind of variation between what these cards do that I can start thinking about how to like actually do the tactical work of manipulating the positions of things on the board and stuff. There's not enough variety in it that I become overwhelmed, and I can look at it and go, oh, there's basically what they've done is they've created these two things that are very like quite easy to execute, a paralyze and a bite, and then the ram is something that you really have to set up. And then that kind of creates a... There we go, I did it that time. So I hit that one, and that one didn't take any damage. That was a little bit underwhelming after it's taken so long to set up. Paralyze that guy. That guy's turned into a poop now. Maybe for some reason they decided we needed corpses on the board like Slay the Spire to prevent the enemies just walking through each other or something. Not Slay the Spire, Darkest Dungeon. If you're making a tactics game with like a party fighting a party, I think learning everything you can about the development of Darkest Dungeon is a good thing to go through as well. There's some really interesting stuff that happened in the course of that game. I was following it from like when it was an early access, and there was like a big fuss around the corpse rule that introduced, you know, when you killed an enemy, they stayed there on the battlefield and it stopped you breaking their formation too quickly. And people were really, really unhappy about that. And it's a really good example of like the sort of thing that ends up happening if you maybe go into early access before you've really tested, like stress tested certain mechanics to see if people break them, because they had to put that mechanic in because the game was just too easy in certain circumstances. And then they ended up having to put it in as a toggle so that people could turn it off because so many of the early access backers were like so annoyed about it. Land Harpy. There's a champions deck. Our summoner doesn't have any cards yet, and I wonder if they can get any cards. It seems like a strange... Ah, magic bullet. So maybe that goes in our... Yeah, I just really think there's too much text in this game. I'm like I say, I'm skipping it because we're here to review the game design and not the storytelling. But if I was playing this as a player, it would just be too much. I think one of the things you need to think about if you're going to make people read a lot in a game is how much does that align with the other stuff that they're doing in the game. And I'll show you some examples in a moment before we move on. But okay, so I've got... It seems like what's happening now is my summoner gets a turn. So even though this game doesn't have a tutorial yet, doesn't seem to, it seems to be quite well structured in terms of like the way that the story is laid out is gradually introducing complexity. So the summoner didn't have any spells in the first couple of rounds. So we're only using our pet, our familiar, to start off with. Now we've got spells, and now we get like a turn with our summoner, who is not on the board. They're just like casting spells in from outside. What this does as well is it means that in like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, you have like units and you have spells. This is like turning those into separate phases. And that means you'll never have like a turn where you really need a spell and you have a handful of unit stuff, or you really need units and you've got a handful of spells. It seems quite smart. Let's get this guy out of the way a little bit so that he doesn't get whomped on next turn. So the MP here is basically our action points to use on our summoner's turn, which is what these blue resources are. Yeah, I definitely agree with the point made in the chat that we shouldn't use this color everywhere. You know, use it for the board, make the cards a different color. Remember, every time, again, if you're new to graphic design and UI design, go and learn about Gestalt theory. It is like the basic, it is the most important like set of ideas that you can learn in terms of how to make your game visually understandable, because it is to do with how human psychology responds to images and visual things. And one of the basic rules of it is everything you do to make things look visually similar makes people associate them. And that might seem very, very obvious, but it's not so obvious when you're making a game, because often we end up just making things match because it looks nice, right? So we think, oh, I'm going to use this color everywhere because then it makes it all coherent and it looks nice. And looks nice isn't the same as communicates well. So for example, if we look at the use of this color, what that will do is anyone who looks at this will assume that everything that has this same color is associated in some way. And obviously it is associated in the sense that it's all part of the same game, but it's a misassociation that then creates a confusion for the player, right? So here they've used this like red color, almost like a neutral color that's like everywhere, and it means it becomes meaningless. So all of the associations that exist in Gestalt theory, basically like having things close together makes you associate them. So we get that naturally through a hand of cards. But if these were just buttons in an interface, again, we would think they were like a category of the same thing because they're together. Having things the same color makes you associate them. Having things the same shape makes you associate them. So, you know, if we had these icons but they were spread around, they would still look like they were part of the same group because the way that the icons are designed. Having the icons look the same and putting them close together makes them feel very strongly associated. And this might all seem like very obvious stuff that you don't need like a special name for or school of thought for, but if you want to learn more about it, then Gestalt design is the kind of area that they teach you in like UX or graphic design college or whatever, and it's very, very helpful. I've done brief sections on it in some of my videos, and I'll link them in the VOD description for anyone who's watching this later on and you want to learn about that stuff specifically from me, but I'm not a super big expert on it, and there's definitely better resources for that. I just tend to teach it using game examples, which makes it easier for gamer-brained people to understand. I think we're going to move on from this one now. I really like lots of what I see here. The general kind of pixel art style of it is very cute and appealing. I like the basic idea of like you've got minions on the board and you're like the wizard outside of the board, so you get your turn to cast your spells, then they all move around and do combat and stuff. What I would like to see is that part of the game developed much further with a lot more. I would love to play a test version of this game that let me just play loads of combats in very quick succession and didn't bother me with any of this story stuff, because I feel like if we think about like what the goal of like early development is, right? So in most media production, and not all game studios run this way, but in most media production, whether you're making a movie or like even if you're making music, you have like a pre-production phase where you make your prototypes and your demos, and basically the goal of pre-production is to work out what you're making. And then at some point you hit the kind of the point where you go into full production. And this is where you move from pre-production into, in game terms, to full development, right? In a band, this might be when you go from like writing demos and practicing them and playing them at gigs to going into the studio to produce a record. You go past this point where you're like, we know what we're making now, we're going to make it. And in order to get to that point where you should, you know, before you get to that point, you shouldn't really be thinking about your game as a commercial project. It's just a series of experiments. And before you get to that point, you're sort of working out what you're making. And then after that point, you know what you're making. And you're just like saying, okay, we've got 6 months or we've got 3 years. We know roughly what we're making. Let's see how much of that we can get done before this deadline. That's like the idealized way of how you make any kind of media. It's like pre-production, production, point in the middle where you're kind of, it's like your green light moment where you go, we know what we're making, this is what we're making, get on with it. In that pre-production stage, if I was looking at a game like this, I would feel like we basically got like progress bars that say how proven is a different part of this game, each part of this game, right? And the combat here is at about 60 or 70%. But we need to fully work out how to make this combat a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more juicy, like a little bit more like VFX and stuff going off when we cast a spell. Because the fantasy of this game is I'm a little wizard with a cool little magical dog, and I'm blasting stuff with spells. And although the combat seems to work quite well as a little board game, there's not a lot of like feedback and stuff to make me feel like cool magical stuff is happening. And if you go back and play some of those earlier JRPGs, or even just look at like the basic combat system that is in RPG Maker, which is modeled on things like Final Fantasy VI and all of that kind of stuff, they make up for the fact that the combat is quite abstract by throwing in loads and loads of VFX and sound effects and screen shake and stuff like that. And I think this needs that, especially when you've gone down the route of making the art style pixel art and having a character that so clearly evokes Final Fantasy. You can have grid-based board gamey gameplay, but particularly with some of these other art decisions, you need to have like spells going off everywhere and like just loads of juice. And I think if you did that, that would get this kind of, you know, imagine it like a research bar of how much has our prototype proven that this is a game worth making, right? When that bar's all the way full up, you go, okay, this is a game worth making. Let's invest more time in it. Let's finish it off. Let's sell it to people. The bar for the actual gameplay part of this is at about 60-70%, and the remainder is like tutorialization, juice, just making things a bit snappier. Like someone in the chat said a moment ago, maybe making these earlier combats much quicker, lower health, so you can just get through them much quicker. The benefit of doing that as well, again, I keep mentioning Slay the Spire, it's hard not to in the context of current indie games. See how quickly the first few combats of Slay the Spire play out. It just lets you get into the groove very, very quickly. And that means that by the time the player is on their 4th or 5th battle, they've passed through that loop of like finish a combat, choose a reward, you know, do whatever you need to do with your deck. They've passed through that loop lots of times. So by the time you start asking them to do more difficult battles, they're invested in continuing and they want to win. The problem with this game at the moment is, like I say, you've got that 60-70% there bar with the combat, and then you've got all of this dialogue and storytelling, which to me doesn't feel like it adds anything and feels like it's kind of like 30% of the bar or 40% of the bar. Like when I'm playing this game, I'm just clicking through this, and that's partly because we're doing a game design stream and not a storytelling stream. But I feel like if I was playing this as a serious player, or I'd bought this game, I would be doing the same thing, skipping the dialogue. And it's really just that you just need more brevity. This is written as a diary, and that makes sense from a thematic point of view, because it's like, we're a wizard, we're carrying a book, it's our spell book that we do combat in, and it's also our journal, and that's kind of cool from a storytelling point of view. I like what you're doing there, but it's like 3 paragraphs here to describe what the player character is doing, and I want what the player character is doing to just be represented in the combat, the thing that I actually do. And if you're going to present me with lots of text in a fantasy game, I would much prefer if that text was just raising questions to make me intrigued and pull me through the game, rather than tell me what happened and exposit what happened, especially when it's the player character who is supposed to be me. You know, what happened is I learnt a new spell and I fought 3 little goobers and my dog was very brave. That's what happened in the narrative of the game as a game. All of this extra stuff, a lot of it is fluff. And I think you really, really need to be honest with yourself about how much value this adds. And maybe it's something you enjoy doing. Like, we've got 8 pages of it here. Eight, it says 1 out of 8. That's a lot. Are you doing this because it's something you enjoy doing, or are you doing it because it adds something? And I think the games like this that do alternate between tactics and story are much briefer in their text. And that's with people that are professional writers who are like being paid just to write, and they know that the players of those games are going to get more value from their writing if there is way less of it than they actually want to do. And you know, you can get away with it more if it is a game where it's the only thing. You know, Disco Elysium is a game where it's the only thing. The one that I always struggled with in this kind of area was Sunless Sea, Sunless Skies. I never played Sunless Skies, the sequel. I would like to at some point. If you ever played Sunless Sea, it's this kind of Lovecraftian. You're in a big in a big dark cave continent and like sailing a boat around. But every time you reach a place, there's just pages and pages and pages of text. And the problem with that game for me is that the text, there's like a really nice feeling set up of sailing the boat around. And that feels really nice. It's like just this, it's just good game feel of how it feels to sail the boat in that game. And then the reading interrupts it in such a harsh way that it just kind of dissipates your enjoyment of the other part of the game. And I think the way it's almost like chess boxing or something like that. The more things, if you know what chess boxing is, it's like a weird sport where you do rounds of boxing and then play a game of chess between the rounds, right? That's obviously quite novel. It's quite interesting, but it has a way smaller amount of people that would want to do it than just playing chess or just boxing, right? Because most of the time when someone thinks, oh yeah, I'd love to play a game of chess right now, they're probably not also in the mood to do a boxing match. And most of the time when people just want to do a boxing match or have a fight, they probably aren't in the mood to play a game of chess. So although chess boxing and mixing those two things together is like an intriguing and novel idea, and it's great that it exists, it's great that it's a thing that happens, it's got a drastically smaller audience or amount of participants than just doing chess or just doing boxing. And the thing about games which try and include an interactive narrative in a format that doesn't need it, or just as too larger part of the game, right? It's that the game that we were checking out, Deck Tactics, which is not a very exciting game, but not a very exciting name, but it's a cool little game. It just feels like the bit that's trying to be a story is way too large a proportion of the game. And even if you were to kind of keep making this game in the way that you are, the problem it poses at this stage of the project is that your playtesters are not getting to stress test the combat part of the game because it is broken up by all this additional stuff that, quite frankly, just doesn't need to be in it at this stage of the project. So, yeah, Pepper in the chat said, this is what I'm worried about in the game I'm working on. What I would do is, if you have an aspiration to do these two things, make parallel prototypes for each part, right? Make just the combat part of the game, or just the tactics, or just the strategy part of the game on its own, and do your writing somewhere else. Maybe do it in a visual novel engine, or just write the script. You don't need to, when you're writing a script for game dialogue, it doesn't need to go in the game. And if anything, getting someone to read it through a lot before you start integrating it into the game as an actual thing that playtesters will see is a good idea anyway. And that's like what would happen in any professional studio. In my first job, I wrote a load of dialogue when I was working on Amateur Surgeon. Some of it was tutorial, some of it was actual character stuff. And most of that went through like 3 revisions before it was actually built into anything in the engine. It was just kind of typed into a document, read by people. In this game, it just feels like it's just loads of stuff that's been dumped. And I can see what it's trying to do. And most of it seems okay from a quality perspective, but it just breaks up the flow of the game so much and in such a large quantity that I think what would be better is between each combat, there is a paragraph and an image, and that's it. Another example of a game that tried to do this and just didn't work for me. If anyone's played Griftlands, this is one of Clay's games, and I really admire Clay as a studio. They do great work. They made Don't Starve. They made Invisible Ink. I love both of those games. Griftlands is a deck builder where you have a little party, and there's like 2 separate games, mini games, and one is for combat and one is for negotiation, and they both involve a different deck of cards. And then this has these kind of RPG dialogues between the matches. And the problem that I had when I was playing this is that, as a deck builder player, you have to keep in your short-term memory what is in your deck and what type of deck you've been building and what it does. And every time the game took me out of the card game and put me into the story world and expected me to care about what was going on in the story, it was like my memory of the deck building part of the game had just been flushed out. And I know that some of that will just be like how my brain works or whatever, but it was a really good example of like, the writing here is good, the story section of the game is good, the deck builder section of the game is good, everything in this game is good, but when you put them together, they fight with each other, and they fight for the player's attention, and they fight for their time and their mental space. And I think that's just something you need to really watch out for when you're thinking of taking a type of game that doesn't normally have a story and inserting a story. It's not just whether or not like you're good at writing a story, which is one concern, right? You might just be spending a lot of time inserting bad content into your game if you add a story and you can't write. But it's also just the player only has so much brain space. And when I play something like Slay the Spire, I do not really have to think about why I'm climbing that tower, killing all those creatures. It's all vibes. It's all mood. You know, and I can look at those creatures and think about what's their deal, why are they here, and that's interesting, but it's not essential to play the game, and it doesn't get in the way of the game. And even like the FromSoft way of storytelling operates in a similar way. Obviously there are people that write lore essays, obviously there are people that like think about who all these characters are and what they want and stuff, but it never gets in the way of someone playing the game, and that's why it works. And every time you're kind of making things about like, here is a bit of story you need to read, you need to pay attention, otherwise you're not going to understand what's going on. Or even worse, here's like 10 pages of text in a book, and if you skip it, it doesn't make any difference. You know, when you do that, it's sort of just like parts of your game fighting with each other. And that's obviously going to be pretty pronounced on this stream because I'm playing the games to play the gameplay part and feedback on the game design, not on like every part of the game. But you know, that was an example of a game where there was like a spelling error on the first page and then just lots and lots of stuff that felt like it didn't need to be there. Do I have an example of a narrative-driven game I love? Yes. I give you 3 examples of narrative-driven games I love. So they kind of fall into categories, okay? So the first one would be, and I think everyone should try and make this, and I'm going to give you a big hint about the game jam now. If you're a narrative-focused person, when Collab Jam comes up, this is the sort of game that I think you could make for Collab Jam. The first one is like wordless storytelling. So the games I would put into this would be Florence. Like, I love Florence. This game made me cry. Very little words in this game. Very, very evocative. Very good use of how games can tell stories using physical object interactions and suggestion and all of that kind of stuff. I absolutely love Florence. There's been a little bit of a furore around the production of it and like what happened in the team, but it's an absolutely beautiful game. Another game I would put in this category would be Unpacking, which I still consider to be a narrative game. It doesn't have an explicit narrative where it tells you a story, but it is such a good example of what you can do with like evocation and personal history and stuff without necessarily having characters talking. And, you know, Reigns, I think, is an example of like a game that is about having dialogue with characters, but it's not Roman Reigns, but the game Reigns. I really like Reigns. It's about sitting there, like responding to events, making little decisions. But again, look at it from a UX point of view. Look at how much text is on screen at any given time. It's very, very slight. And one of the things I notice about Inkle games as well, and like every Inkle game I've played, I've loved. So Inkle made Pendragon. I haven't played Pendragon. Heaven's Vault, I absolutely love. Overboard, I love. 80 Days is one of my favorite games of all time. 80 Days is like it's a visual novel that's also a strategy game about trying to get around the world. If you look at the UX of 80 Days, it sort of tricks you into reading a lot more than you think you're reading, because the amount of text shown on screen at any given time is quite small, right? And this is one of the things that you should be aware of if you want to make very text-heavy narrative games, is the ones that are most successful in the space are very, very attentive to not hitting people with a big wall of text and making them feel like they're reading a book. Inkle are really good at doing this. They always design their text in their games so that it appears in little bite-sized chunks, and you feel like you're playing a video game because you're just tapping through. Think about like how many words the player reads per tap. And you might think it's bad. You might think, well, actually, I should display the amount. It's display a big paragraph and then a tap, and a big paragraph and then a tap, because the player doesn't want to tap lots of times. But they're there to play a video game. They do want to tap. So actually, it's probably better to do like sentence per tap. So I think about a lot of these things in terms of UX, because I always feel like the games that I've really gelled with that tell a story and have a narrative focus have been very, very good at like hiding the book in the UX of the game. I think 80 Days is a good example of that. Even if you look at Disco Elysium, right? If you look at the UI of Disco Elysium, it's in this long, this is going to end up having to become a video edit down, isn't it? It's in this long, narrow column. And there's a reason for that. So for 100 years, or possibly longer, we have been printing newspapers in this format as well. If you look at a newspaper, it has like 3 columns or more of text. And the reason for that is when text is presented in columns, you can read it much faster, because when you finish a line of text, the distance of travel is just down to there. And if you look at old CRPGs, like the original Baldur's Gates and Arcanum and stuff, they had the text in this big, wide, horizontal bar down the bottom, and it was harder to read. This is easier to read because when you get to the end of the line, you go to the next line and your eye doesn't have to travel as far. And it also just reduces the amount of text that's on screen at any one time. So there's no point where like a mentally exhausted person looks at that screen and goes, oh my God, I'm reading a book, right? All of these things are things that it's worth considering if you're making a game where you're asking people to read a lot. Because if you look at all of the best-in-class games, the Disco Elysiums, the Reigns, all of the Inkle games, like the kind of top-shelf narrative games of the last 10 years, all pay a lot of attention to the UX of how they limit the amount of text on screen at any given time. Right? Yeah, all of the Inkle games do feel like interactive comic books. Yeah. And I don't think like Japanese visual novels should ever be your model for anything, because the audience for those is so dedicated to consuming that thing. And that means that they're not a good UX model for a wider audience or for people's like first game. You know, like, I mean, if you look at what Dream Daddy did, they had like the amount of text that is presented on screen at one time, very small. It's a sentence at a time, right? So this is a UX design that acknowledges that actually people who are there to play a video game would rather click 3 times as many times and like feel like they're interacting or turning the page. It's like the digital equivalent of turning the page. They would rather see fewer lines of text at once and click more often, right? And you will see this a lot with modern narrative games, just a high degree of attention to that. So when I kind of complain about games like we were just playing, it's less just that there's a story, and it's more that the story is presented in a way that doesn't like feel like it respects people's time so much. And I think the game that we're going to head into now feels like it might go in that direction as well. So the next game we're looking at is called Northanda Chronicles. It wasn't on the schedule. I picked it out because there were 2 games that weren't relevant to what the stream was supposed to be about today. And this is kind of doing a rogue book where you've got a deck builder with multiple characters that you control. I'm seeing lots and lots of text. It does look a little bit more like it's not so lore focused, but let's get into it. Oh, the other game I wanted to shout out that I've been playing recently because it's on PlayStation Plus or whatever it's called. Been playing Season. This is a gorgeous game. It's kind of in a strange alternate universe that feels modern but is not clearly not our world. You are a girl that lives in a community where no one leaves, and for some reason you've convinced your mum to let you go out and explore the world and chronicle it and take photographs and stuff. And you go around and take photographs and place them in a journal. And the UX of how you do the journal is so satisfying. I recommended it to the dev of Cracks Where the Light Gets In because it feels quite adjacent to the game that they're working on. This game is just absolutely gorgeous. It's a little bit overwrought in terms of how some of the dialogue is written. Sometimes when the character is thinking out loud, you think, this character is supposed to be like 18 and they're incredibly verbose. But it's just really, really nice and evocative. And it has like a quality that I like in narrative games is to have like minimal exposition that doesn't like raise more questions. And the world that you explore in this is like that. It's kind of similar to the world building in the Blueprints. It's like every time you find something out, it just has more questions in it. So you're being dragged through the game by your curiosity to find out more about the thing. And no one's just actively ever telling you about the thing. And that's one of the benefits of some of the storytelling methods that we use in games, like having journals and like fragments that characters have written and left behind in the environment, is that you can have this incomplete exposition where instead of a character coming on screen and telling you a bunch of stuff that happened, you can have like these voices from the past telling you, you know, half-truths and stuff with missing information that's really compelling as a player because it just pulls you into like, what's going on? And then you're more actively involved because instead of like passively watching a story involving other people, which is what like bad game writing often ends up feeling like, instead you're involved as this kind of detective type character, whether it's explicitly a detective game or not. But anything that kind of creates an enigma and makes you as a player go, oh, I want to find out more about that thing, is going to be a strong thing to have in a video game because you're trying to invest the player in like actually being involved in the situation rather than just experiencing it as an observer. And that's something that goes back in literature. Like if you go all the way back to when like Arthur Conan Doyle was writing Sherlock Holmes, there were a lot of contemporary detective fiction writers at the same time. There's a book on this that's called As If. I think Game Studies Study Buddies did a episode on it, and it was about Arthur Conan Doyle, Tolkien, and Lovecraft, and how these people were like the first authors to create these big, coherent fictional worlds that spanned multiple books. But the guys that were writing those detective novels in the Victorian period, they had like a kind of, I don't know if it was like an actual manifesto or just a sort of gentleman's agreement, but one of the rules of that genre was that when you get to the solution at the end of the crime puzzle, the reader of the book should have been able to work it out themselves using the facts presented in the book so far, right? So this idea of like involving the audience in deducing stuff about the world that you're in, I think it's really important in games. I think some of the most compelling narrative games have that quality in them, but it's not unique to games. And like mystery books are a good example of that. You're like reading it and trying to solve it yourself, and that's like something that predates video games by like 200 years, you know. Let's check out Northanda Chronicles, and as that's loading up, I'll just see what people are saying in the chat. I already pressed download on this. Why is it not? The art on this one does kind of give very mobile gamey vibes. So let's see, but it's not immediately kind of exciting me in terms of what we can see of this game yet. It looks very polished. Yeah, I still need to play Firewatch. I've never got round to it. Welcome, adventurer, to the world of Northanda Chronicles, a roguelike deck builder lovingly crafted by two passionate developers. In this demo, you'll journey into one of the game's early dungeons, leading a party of brave heroes, the intrepid Flint, the mysterious Kaelin, the dependable Halder, the ingenious Baltric, and the radiant Zoria. Okay, fine. New run, Empower. What's Empower? Okay, so we can upgrade our cards over time. Interesting. This is giving a lot of Roguebook so far. The way that the metagame in Roguebook works, though, is that I think you upgrade, like, permanent buffs on the characters rather than changing the decks. I can't remember. I want the Goblin. I want to be the Goblin. Oh, they've got different roles, so we choose who's to support the Slayer or the Defender. But that's the thing still, Nater. So you say you thought Firewatch wouldn't be my cup of tea. If a game is a narrative game and it's only a narrative game, then it has a much better chance of being a good narrative game, right? It's back to the chess boxing thing. It's people don't want to do chess boxing, not because they don't like chess or because they don't like boxing. It's because most people don't want to alternate between doing those things, right? That's the way I see it. So a game like Firewatch, I haven't played it. I've played games like it, and I like walking simulators. I like games like Gone Home. I liked Dear Esther when I played it. You know, something like Stanley Parable gets an easier pass because people find it funny, and with Stanley Parable, people go, ah, it's gamer jokes. I get it. I'm a gamer. But generally speaking, I like walking sim type games. What I don't like is when a game is trying to give me a particular type of like game or toy experience and the story gets in the way of that. And I think the vast majority of times I see people putting a story in a small indie game, that is what is going to end up happening, unless they're very, very careful about trying to make the gameplay be where the story lives, right? Making it so that the thing that the player is doing is either directly uncovering the story or impacting it, rather than the story being a series of like text-based or cutscene vignettes between the things the player does. That's the difference for me. It's not that I don't like story, it's that I think the best way to tell a story is to work with the rest of the thing you're doing, rather than have it as like a side dish that just comes in and is like putting kimchi on ice cream or something like that. Sorry to the kimchi ice cream enjoyers out there, but you know. Draw an additional card every third turn. At the start of each battle, draw 2 additional cards. Whenever you add a card to your deck, gain 20 gold. Let's go for that. That seems like a good thing to start off with. The Fermat quote, sorry for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. Yeah, editing is 90% of the work. Whispering Wildwoods. Once a refuge for Northanda's creatures, the woods now twist with the void's corruption. I like this little kind of coloured flavour text thing. The shrine is tainted within its festering heart. The verdant colossus stirs, a fallen guardian lost and steeped in rot. So, see what they've done here. This is very evocative. A fallen guardian, its festering heart. A fallen guardian lost and steeped in rot. This is very, very evocative writing, but it also is respecting our time and acknowledging that we're not here to read a novel, right? This is good. The writer is showing off that they can write, and they're not doing that through volume and quantity. They're doing it through quality. Vibes per words. That's the quotient you should use if you're trying to put story in a game that is like a tactical game or a game about world building rather than like, you know, a pure story game. What's the vibes per words ratio? Because the last game we looked at, it felt like it had a very low vibes per words ratio. This feels like the vibes per words is very high. Think of it as writing poetry rather than writing like a story in prose. Little vignettes that are just supposed to give you a little bit of a sense of what you're doing, why you're doing it, the stakes of the world, and to inject some mood, like create some mystery, not to tell you 3 paragraphs of exposition of what a character did, because this is what the characters are doing. We're fighting stuff with cards. Okay. So I get to choose a battle. It tells me what the reward is, or I can do the mystery. I don't want to do the mystery. I want to... We're getting gold anyway for adding to our deck, so let's go for gems. I don't know what the difference is yet. Optimize your vibes per words. We've started off with a lot of deck variety, which is a little bit daunting. That's partly because we've got cards for each character, right? So our support has the green cards, our Slayer has the red cards, our Defender has the blue cards. So it's a similar system to how Slay the Spire works. And I think the way it works is we have 1 mana per class, and then we have initiative that can be used as like wild mana. For 2 turns, whenever Kaylin attacks, draw a card. Okay, I'm going to use that. She's got an upgrade now. Whenever she attacks, we get another card. And we're getting attacked for 8, so we need to do some sort of defense. So let's summon a barricade for him. So far, so good. We can gain some armor. Add some armor with this guy. Might as well use Scavenge Scrap as well, but I can't do anything with that right now. Okay, so every time we shoot on this turn and the next, oh, I think it's just this turn, Kaylin is going to draw a card as well. We're going to taunt with Haldor because that will force them to attack this guy. Notice that I just know what taunt means because we're using language that comes from other games. I know that should seem very obvious, but so often we see people just like making up terms for things that already have terms in other games, and it's kind of... It's a little bit disrespectful for people's time to just reinvent the wheel when it comes to language, especially when it's like game mechanics. So we don't know, I think, yeah, we don't know who they're going to attack. Does it tell us? Oh yeah, no, it does tell us who they're going to attack. That's cool. So we'll keep armoring him up. They're going to attack him for 14, so we'll give her that focus boost again. Shoot, and then a goading blow. This is incredibly intuitive. Like, I haven't had to... There hasn't been a tutorial, really, and I've been able to teach myself how the game works by just using the tooltips, which is ideally what most people who play these games want. You know, we've played enough of these. We just want to be able to, like, tooltip over stuff and understand what's different about your game via the tooltips rather than an explicit tutorial. That doesn't mean the game will never need a tutorial for, like, absolute noobs where it's their first deck builder, but I don't think it's where your emphasis should be when you're, like, first working on the game. Okay, so this person is going to attack Boltrick, who's our support. We're going to summon Shield Mark II. So they all have a little slot for a defender, which is very cute, and I think that is going to open up lots of cool design space for what happens when you put different things in front of different characters. Tim in the chat said, I like story-driven games, I like card games, I have trouble with narrative card games. That doesn't make you a weirdo at all. I think those things are at odds because they require different types of thinking. Like, stories are about empathizing with characters most of the time. A card game is about processing, like, numbers and possibility space and stuff. They're just not... They don't go together most of the time. They can do, but, I mean, if you look at most of the tabletop examples of, like, board games where you're telling a story and playing cards, like, for example, the Arkham Horror living card game is like an RPG that you play with a deck builder deck of cards. The difference in those is that you're with people and you're creating a story by talking about what's happening, which is very different from like trying to play a card game on a computer and keep having it interrupted with an authored story that the developer is trying to tell you. Crumble Strike. If the target is burning, apply Fragile. I don't think we have burning as a keyword, but I would like to try and build towards that because it just seems like a fun thing to build a deck around. When I don't have very long to playtest one of these games, I will always try and just, like, immediately go for a build that just sounds interesting, I guess. Well, we'll do a guard on you, because you're going to get whacked for 6. But yeah, if we could build a fire build, that sounds fun. I love a bit of damage over time. You're already attacking me, so I don't need to goad you, but... Yeah, the UI is really nice. It does feel a little bit mobile gamey to me, but then I think that was what a lot of people said about Roguebook as well. This guy is going to do some sort of buff to itself. Let's just focus on killing the other guys so that they don't have as many attacks. We're going to attack him. Let's put a barricade in front of him. And do the focus upgrade, and then I can't do anything else. The way that the mana system works with the drawing for 3 characters seems to work quite well at the moment. I think one of my longer term balancing concerns with this would be like what happens if you overload your deck with cards for 1 character. But maybe that's a deliberate kind of problem that you want the player to have to think about. Whenever you debuff an enemy, Kaelin gains 1 strength this turn. I'm guessing we could put that into the fire build category, because if they're on fire, presumably being on fire is a debuff, so we don't have any way to turn them on fire yet, but we have a card that's related to that, so I should keep building towards that. Read a tome, loot a common card. Okay. 2 fragile, that's a debuff. Or apply weak when Halder parries. Okay. Halder gains 6 armor. Parry, if the target enemy intends to attack, then apply 1 weak. So I think that gives him armor, and if he's targeted by the enemy, then it reduces their attack, which would count as a debuff, which would trigger that other card we just got. Let's loot another card. Okay. So Spicy said, I wonder if people will see this and think I've got Slay the Spire at home. I mean, you could say the same thing about Roguebook as well. And Roguebook came out after Slay the Spire, and the thing is, I think it's the 2 cakes meme, right? Do you know the 2 cakes meme? I think there's a lot of wisdom in the 2 cakes meme. So the artist, oh man, that guy's cake is way better than mine. The audience, holy shit, 2 cakes. Now, obviously there's a limit to this. Because if this cake looks absolutely revolting, no one's going to eat it. But if this cake all gets eaten up and is gone, then there's still a cake left. So what you're trying to do is make a cake that is not so inferior to the other one that no one would ever want to eat it. But at some point, people are going to get sick of that other game. I think the trick is, with this type of genre, your game needs to have different things to learn in. Because if it is just exactly the same as Slay the Spire with a different aesthetic, think of what someone is getting. If you go back to this idea of like learning a game is about exercising a basic human instinct to learn, and that's what we get out of gameplay, and it's why we're driven to play games, and it's what fun is, right? This is this kind of idea of what fun is and why humans play games. If you adhere to that, then the thing that makes people go from one game that they like to a similar game they like is like, okay, this other game is of a similar quality, but I get to learn a slightly different thing. And if you look at the history of, like, I don't know, Final Fantasy games, for example, they're all different. They have a different structure. They don't reuse the same combat system, the same upgrade system, and that is because fans of those games have a sort of like almost like a complexity fetish, where they like learning a new complex system. That is the appeal of JRPGs to them. And I think with deck builders, you've got a similar thing. You want enough recognizable stuff so that you can have that experience that I just had, where I play the game and it's really intuitive and I know how everything works. And there are a few different mechanics, but I can just hover over things and quickly learn how they work. But I still want to learn a different system, because to me, that is what the feeling of gradually mastering something is. You know, in an action game like a shooter, you're going to be gradually mastering the layout of the levels, how the guns feel, how the other players behave. And in any type of game that has a skill-based element, you're trying to mix together, like, here are the skills that you can import from this other game where you already understand how things work. And maybe your game is like 70% that. It's like 70% things that people recognize from other games and can already do. So when they come into your game, they're like, I know how this works. But it needs to have some amount of difference. And I think the issue is that often people like frame this just as innovation and novelty. It's like, oh, your game needs to have something different about it so it stands out. No, your game needs to have something different about it, because what people come to skill-based games for is this feeling of mastery. And if they come to your game and they already know 100% of what they need to know, they're not going to have fun, because fun is actually the experience of learning how to play the game. If they come to your game and it's way too novel and there's nothing they can latch onto because it doesn't relate to any other game they've played in any other way, they're just not going to play. They're not going to hang around because it's not fun, right? So if you think of, you know, flow theory, you've got that channel, boredom on one side, stress on the other. When you're bored, it's because there's nothing new, there's nothing stimulating. When you're stressed, it's because you've been thrown in the deep end. Everything is too new, everything is overstimulating. Flow is this space in the middle where we're kind of bouncing between finding it too easy, finding it too hard. And when you make a game and you try and balance like copying 80 or 90% of the features from another game with like 10 or 20% innovation, that is what you're trying to do. And I think it's really important to not think of that just in like marketing terms of like, oh, I need to stand out by having some novelty or innovation. It's also just having that slightly different thing, having that slightly different system, or, you know, tweaking the mechanics slightly so that there is a new thing for people to learn. That is what draws people to skill-based games. And I think that's something you could work out yourself if you look back at your history. If you pick a genre that you've got really deep into, whether it's card games or RTS games or shooters, look at a genre of games you've got really deep into where you've played lots of different types of games in that genre. What was it that kept you going? Probably that mix of familiarity with how the basic stuff works. You know, all first-person shooters have like 70% of the same controls and mechanics, plus that novelty that each one adds, which creates this like re-onboarding of like having to learn a new thing. It's that balance that is really, really important. And any kind of skill-based game, whether it's a game about judgment and strategy or a game about twitch controls, has that kind of thing going on with it. We can battle some forest defenders. We can go to a golden opportunity. I've got quite a lot of gold. I don't know what this means, so it feels like a false choice at this stage because I haven't played the game enough to know what this one actually means. So these are definitely battles. Anywhere Co. This guy could be about to give me a quest, or it could be a shop. I'm going to go that way because we've got what seems like quite a lot of gold at this stage. Okay. It's a shop. That was presented in a strange way. We could have gone straight to this screen. Knight's Hammer, you now earn 100% more Eternium. Okay. That's very, like, this naming is quite cheesy, but it is helpful. It's called Eternium because this resource is the one you spend on the upgrades you keep between runs. It's eternal, right? It's cheesy, but it does the job. Like, I saw the word Eternium and I just guessed what that was before I'd even read it. Generous gift. Card rewards offer 1 additional card to choose from. That seems good, especially seeing as we've already started to lean into quite a specific build. Great Vulture's Talon. Whenever an enemy dies, add a Talon Strike for Kaelin to your hand. Caffinium gem to a card. Oh, we can do gem upgrades on cards. This is a feature from Roguebook as well. So Roguebook allows you to upgrade the cards by putting gems on them that add additional... Whenever a card with Obsidian is drawn, its owner gains 2 armor. This game has the juice as far as I'm concerned. There's so much here that I really like. It feels like the sort of thing I might just schedule like a very long stream to play in depth, which is difficult because I said that the other day about another game, so I'm going to have to do it with both of them now. But there's a lot here that I like. I really liked Roguebook. Lots of people bounced off it. I thought it was really good. It had less breadth than Slay the Spire in terms of like how many varieties of enemies and stuff there were, but I like this whole thing of having a party and controlling it through cards. I was worried initially that there was just too much variety here, but you're kind of quite limited in what you can do in a single turn by the mana anyway. I guess we upgrade this later on, but that prevents this from being overwhelming. And because we have quite generic sort of World of Warcraft type fantasy characters here, and they have a clear role, unlike the blue guy is the support, we just have a very clear sense of like, even if I don't know what these specific cards do, I know that if I look over here and there's a lot of damage incoming, I know it's my blue guy who's going to be the guy that generates the shield. I know it's my red person that's going to be the person that deals the damage, right? There's just a very... They're using all of this kind of systemic language from other types of role-playing games to make potentially difficult parts of their game much easier to understand. We're going to use counter, I think. I need to drag it onto you. So Howder gains 6 armor and they get 1 weak, which means they do 25% less attack damage. Did that go down? Was it 11 before? Can't remember. So he has this scrap resource, this little stack of buffs that he uses to do crafting. I can't see which cards that's used for yet. Okay, he's going to get attacked this turn. He's only got 3 armor. Let's give him a barricade. Let's give Kaelin the focus upgrade and put some more guard on him. Still got this burning synergy and I don't have anything to trigger it, which is annoying me, but that's not a fault of the game. Can't attack the guy at the back. So this icon that's like a stone skull is taunt, so I can only attack this guy at the moment because he's taunting. And I'm not going to be able to take out the guy at the back until this guy's going to keep taunting while the guy behind him does high damage, so I need to... right. He's going to attack my archer. I'm going to... Oh, I can't do a taunt with him because I can't get through this guy's taunt. He's got like a damage return mechanic here as well. One thing I would say about this, I know I've been like a little bit kind of gushingly positive about this so far. One thing I would say you need to watch out for, not important at this stage of development, but when you get closer to launch, is try and reduce the complexity of these early on. Because you've got a few combats that are hit, you know, we're only like 3 combats in or something. Quite a lot of icons and stuff over here. So, you know, think about reducing the complexity of like how much stuff is going on with the amount of information about the enemies and what they do in the first few combats. Okay, this guy's going to kill... It's going to kill her this time, I think. So we get to see what happens there at least. She's downed. When drawn, give all heroes 1 armor. Okay, so her cards have been replayed with this. These guys get a free armor when that is drawn. So that's what happens when one of your characters is downed. And that, I don't know really how that's going to work, but it shows that there's already probably a lot of thought and playtesting gone into that already, because it seems like a very specific decision to have it so that, you know, if you have 2 characters down, you're going to be drawing these, you're going to be getting loads of free armor. So the game kind of giving you a bit of rubber banding when you're already losing to make sure it doesn't... Because the action economy loss of like losing a character and not having access to their abilities or their cards is quite big. So they've put some sort of counterbalance in there already. Yeah, I think we're ramping up a bit too quickly in terms of, not necessarily difficulty, but like the amount of complexity of what these guys do and how you need to deal with them is growing quite quickly. I think maybe a good rule for that is if the enemies look kind of basic and dumb, make them basic and dumb. It's kind of how people read situations in RPGs anyway, like whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. It's like, if there's a wizard, that is the theming of the game telling me this is going to be an intelligent character, you need to think about how you deal with them. Whereas like a big barbarian thing is just like, you hit it until it dies, you know? This has been quite a tactically complex encounter for like number 3 in terms of what it's asking me to do with my order of operations of like how I who I attack in what order. Just it's gonna be very close. He's got some vampire attack as well. He's just got too many different little buffs and stuff for an early game enemy, I think. I think we're gonna die. Yeah, he's stealing life. It is harsh for... See, chat's on my side. This game is bullying me. We're gonna die really quickly. But I like it enough that I think even if we die, we're gonna try and squeeze in a second run. Call of the Void. Died. Darkness prevails. Okay, new game. Yeah, the ramp up, it's not necessarily the difficulty. I don't have a problem with a game whooping my ass very quickly. I don't mind that at all. But it's the level of complexity of like the amount of information we need to process about the enemies and what they do. We're gonna have her. We're gonna have him. Can we have him? We can have him as the Slayer. Okay, we'll go with these guys. Flint in support. Slayer Goblin dude. Don't know if that's going to change his deck. Really don't know. At the start of every third turn, draw an extra card. Look at this guy. See, that looks like a cunning creature. That's a creature I expect to have some sort of smart rules. And I think that's a good way of, like, mapping the theming onto the complexity of the game. You know, if the creature looks smart, make them have smart rules. If they're just like a beast, don't make them too complicated. So, that she gives someone else armor and she gets 3 armor. So I can give him 3 armor and she gets, because they're both being attacked. Zoria gains 3 armor and then at the start of your next turn deal 3 damage to all enemies. I can't use that because it costs 2. Yeah, the mana system is really smart because basically every turn you can do a 1 cost move with someone, but the 2 cost move you can only use it with 1 person because it uses that initiative, which is like a neutral mana. What does Radiance do? At the end of your turn, deal Radiance damage to the enemy, then reduce to a random enemy, then reduce Radiance by 1. Okay. Get some damage on them. Can't use my red mana. I don't... I mean, this is still in demo stage. There is meta progression, but basically the meta progression is gained on you gaining this material. The danger of that is it suggests I can spend it how I want, which means that there's a bigger chance of people gimping themselves. You know, if I can spend if there's a progression currency I can spend on what I want, then you're going to have like a bigger range of experiences between players. Whereas what Slay the Spire does is it just goes, oh, you've played the game 3 times, unlock these cards that everyone else unlocks at the same point as you. It's nice to have the choice, but it's definitely something you need to be conscious of. And what I would do is have some sort of data tracking in a game like this so that you can see how the impact of how people spend their Eternium is affecting them. Because what you don't want is there to be like a particularly bad choice of how to spend your progression upgrades and then those people quit the game. I know lots of kind of smaller devs would just think, well, by that time they've given me their money anyway, so ha ha ha. But this is very polished. It's had a lot of time put into it. It would be a shame to not see it kind of approached in a way that's sustainable. And doing that kind of stuff, like Slay the Spire did all of this data-driven balancing. All of that stuff kind of adds up to a game that people, you know, stream for longer, get more people into. It's treating your game as like an ongoing culture rather than just like a quick thing that you're hoping people give you $5 for and don't refund. He deals 5 damage at the end of each turn. So the little goblin engineer guy, if you have him as an attack character, he has an attack summon instead of a defense summon. Zoya gains 4 armor and apply 1 weak to all enemies. Okay, that's good. He needs some defense. Okay, so if I do this, I'm going to save that red mana for next turn, right? I'm going to do that because the bonk isn't going to do that much damage to them anyway because they've both got some shield. Oh yeah, I've got 2 red now. So yeah, you can bank. That's kind of cool. This system is really well thought out. And it's a really good example of how, like, spending the time to think through what is possibly the least sexy part of your game could make it work in a really neat way. So yeah, I've got more red mana to spend. I don't have anywhere to spend it at the moment, but you know, one of the reasons why Hearthstone is so popular is it really thought through trying to not use the Magic the Gathering way of doing energy as cards. Yeah, Louise, I will change the titles when the VOD goes out, but I had 2 games submitted where they weren't available when I, you know, started prepping for the stream, so I had to change the games that we were playing today. Because people submit games and then delist the demo and stupid stuff like that. I don't have enough time to like work out people's individual contexts and stuff, but I quite frequently get like people submit games and then I don't get to play them for a few months, and then I go to play them and they've been delisted or whatever. I think if you're still in that stage where less than 1,000 people have played your game, I think getting as many people to play it as possible, even if I'm going to be very critical of it, is still a better outcome for you than hiding it because you're being precious about it, which seems to happen a fair bit. And people like open a demo and then close it again because, you know, they're making all these changes to the game and they don't want people to play it in that state or whatever. I don't know. I think if your the only situation where it makes sense to do that is if your original demo is so bad that it doesn't inspire confidence in your just general development ability, and when people play it they go, I never want to play anything by this person because they're clearly incompetent. And that's not usually the vibe that I get from 90% of demos I play. Very rare that I feel that way about it. It's just like, this is kind of okay, you need to make some different design decisions, or you need to scale it back and not do this area because, you know, this or that thing is something you're clearly not that strong at. But yeah, I can get the Cobbled Cache. Upon pickup, gain 4 backpack slots. Gems cost 50% less at shops. That sounds fun. I do like the gem upgrades mechanic from Roguebook. I'm very glad to see that here. I'm going to beat this guy up. He's got an artifact. He's got an artifact in there, probably. That little blobbly wobbly guy. What are you going to do? You're going to summon something. Okay, we'll do Void Pulse because that does damage at the start of the next turn when they've summoned their people. And then we'll bank all the rest of our mana. Hokopo asked if this would benefit from early access. I will talk about that in a moment. I was talking to someone about that yesterday, and we were doing like a mentoring session. I have some thoughts about early access. Right, we're going to absorb all of that this turn. So, yeah, listen to what Sky Ruby is saying. Basically, I think with early access, it's a good route if you're very honest with yourself about the quality of what you're doing and it's already feeling like a professional quality game. I think early access can be good for certain types of games. If you look at the games that have been through early access and been successful, like Noita, I've been playing Omelette You Cook, which I think everyone should go and check out. It's a very funny little deck builder where you cook food. I think that had an early access as well. All of the successful early access games have already been to quite a high standard of quality during early access. The reason why early access can work particularly for run-driven games, is if you think about it, with a run-driven game you can make a game with a start and end, and then people can play it and feel like they can play the whole game. Darkest Dungeon did this as well. Lots of roguelikes where there's like a clear end to the game that you can actually reach and beat. That's a good candidate for a game that you can release in that format, because a lot of the development is filling out the middle with more variety of random stuff and more player options and stuff. But because the game is non-linear, you can kind of, you know, make 25% of the game, but make it a playable from start to finish type game, and then just gradually pump more content into the middle, which is what you're able to do with a Darkest Dungeon or a Noita or something like that. It's only going to work if you're clearly already operating at a standard and of like technical proficiency and like art quality and game design quality, that it is reasonable to ask people to pay for that thing. So I think if you look at the folks who've done that and done it successfully, most of them are probably either coming from a background where they've worked in someone else's studio before they've gone indie, or they're working in teams where, okay, maybe they haven't worked in games before, but there is an actual professional programmer and a professional artist and stuff like that on the team. If you're a solo hobbyist working on your own, putting a game into early access could be very, very dangerous. And I would say you still need to go through lots and lots of phases of getting people to play the game and seeing people enthusiastic about it and all of that stuff before you even consider that. I've been considering it for the game that we're working on, but it has a lot of sort of problems that we would need to resolve before we even get to that stage. But it does come back to that thing of like, what is the format of the game? And if it's a kind of roguelike or run-based game where you can, you know, release an early access version of it and then for a year just keep pumping new randomized content into the middle of the game to like fill it out and make it more varied, that's a format where it really suits it. But I think a lot of it comes down to being very, very honest with yourself about the quality of what you're producing. And a lot of that just comes down to, I think, playing other games and like understanding them as honest competition, and not in like a like against them kind of way, but just when people go to buy your game, they're going to see all of these other similar games and what would make someone play your game instead. I think there's a lot of people just putting out hobby projects, and I don't know if anyone else gets Code Monkey's newsletter. He put one out a few weeks ago that was basically talking about this phenomena where people are initially honest with themselves that they're doing game dev as a hobby, and then as they start to finish a project, they think, well, I might as well put this thing out. And they start to like pivot, and they haven't really taken stock of whether the game they're working on is actually like a commercial standard game. And they sort of change their expectations of the project they're working on through the project. And so they start off with something that's a hobby, and then by the end they're like, oh, I should sell this to people, when it's actually a bit of a mess. You've just got kind of sunk cost fallacy about it because you spent so much time on it. And I think if you can't really like honestly appraise the quality of what you're doing compared to similar games in its area, then you shouldn't really be thinking about this kind of stuff. And it's why it's really, really important to play indie games. We had a conversation on the Discord yesterday with someone was saying, but all the games I like are like big, high budget games. And it's like, well, sorry, but that's not the space you're working in, you know? And also understanding that people don't buy indie games out of like pity for the developer for being the small guy. I find myself saying this over and over again. But people are only impressed by a game being like made by a solo developer when it looks like it was made by 10 people. That's why people are so impressed by something like Stardew Valley. It's not the fact that a person made a game on their own, it's the fact that a person made a game on their own that looks like 10 or 20 people worked on it. Oh, thank you, Jackalus. Jackalus said you have just been using this stuff during your first job as a game designer. I'm glad that you found that helpful. I did that. I sort of stumbled into my first game design job, and it was like I had sort of like imposter syndrome, and I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing. And it felt like everyone I worked with at that company had been working together for 10 years, making like Flash games and stuff. So they had their way of doing things, but they also didn't feel super connected to like what best practices in the rest of the industry were. So then I felt like it was my job to learn all that stuff as well. I mean, it wasn't a design job, it was a production job, so that's fine, because that's kind of what a producer does, is like work out what the best practices for that studio are. I wasn't very good at that. I'm not very good at managing other people, and I'm very time blind. So anything where I have to manage other people in terms of like, you know, what are we getting done this month? That's not, you know, that's why this channel is a good job for me because I get to do jump between a bunch of different things. Managing other people is not one of my strong suits. But it is very helpful to have something like this when you're in that position, because it can feel kind of maddening. Just like the sort of the imposter syndrome of having that sort of authority of, you know, you're in a decision-making role in some sort of studio and maybe not comfortable yet with the idea that no one really knows what they're doing, and actually it's just about making the best guess you can at any given time and knowing what you're going to do if it doesn't work, you know? So your taunts the enemy, draw 1 card, deplete. Okay. Every 5 attacks you play, deal 3 damage to all enemies. That's cool, but it's not as valuable when we're fighting one enemy on their own. At the start of your turn, heroes below 50% of max HP gain 1 strength. That's quite fun. I don't usually like builds where you're like rewarded for taking damage, but we're in that situation with a few of these guys already. I would love to go back into university teaching at some point, but it's so hard to find a place. I'm very, very wary of individual institutions, and like, I mean, we've had like ongoing strikes in the UK with the university union, and for good reasons that are probably quite boring to go into now. Very hard for them to get lecturers that are actually worked in industry, because the pay disparity between like a senior industry role and a teaching role is massive. Like a 50% pay cut. If you had like a senior enough role in a game studio to be teaching people with some degree of authority, then going into a college, university teaching role would be a 50% pay cut in most cases. That's why, you know, you get a lot of places where all the tutors are kind of hobbyists and stuff, which is kind of, you know, I'm not saying that's inherently bad, but I don't think it should be the norm, you know. Very much skimming the cards at this stage. Right, is that the first down we've had this run? The void embraces the fallen, mending what was broken. As it weaves their body whole, their spirit begins to unravel. Revival downed heroes at 50% of max HP. Add 1 corruption to your deck for each hero revived. So you can see there's multiple points in this game where they've really thought about how to take, you know, losing a character and turn that into a series of interesting trade-offs, and it's really good. So if you haven't played Roguebook, the way that Roguebook works, it's similar to this. You have 2 characters, and your deck is a mix of cards from both of them, and whichever character is at the front in that game is taking the damage, and you have moves that switch them round. So there's a lot of stuff done in that game to like make the mix of characters work, and this game is doing a similar thing. You don't have the positioning stuff. When a character gets knocked down in Roguebook, all of their cards are replaced with a kind of revive card, and I think it's when you play 3 of them they get back up. So it has that kind of trade-off of like when someone goes down, you lose access to their cards, and you have to kind of waste some of your turn doing something to get them back. It really feels like they've thought about that here and developed it into another thing, because we have that kind of, it's almost a helper mechanic of when someone is downed, you get free, everyone else gets free armor every time you draw their cards, which it's I think it's framed as resolve, which makes a lot of sense as well from a thematic point of view. It's like, you know, it's kind of creating that story moment of our buddy's down, we need to fight extra hard, so they get tougher, they get this kind of free mana for drawing their cards. That also helps to offset the fact that if the character that goes down is one where you've bought more cards for them and your deck is slightly overloaded with that type of card, you know, in this case, if I had 4 more cards in my deck that belong to Flint, my green guy, my support, I'm going to be drawing those cards more often, and so the resolve effect is heightened to kind of counteract the fact that my deck is overloaded with his cards. Now, after the combat, we have another trade-off that is, okay, I can revive him, but we're going to get like a permanent bad card in our deck, like a Slay the Spire Curse. Really, really neat. Really, really well thought through. Lots of stuff here that's communicating to me that, you know, even if every part of this game is not perfect yet, the devs have really, really thought about these aspects of the design. They're not just kind of copying stuff from elsewhere without thinking it through. They've really, really thought about like the specific game context that they're working in, and they're doing innovative things, but they're doing innovative things to solve problems rather than just for the sake of it, you know. Like the opposite example I would give of this is my perennial rant about the deck builder where you don't discard your cards, where it's like you're doing something different but you don't understand how that impacts the main mechanics of the game, you know. She wasn't downed. He was the one who was down, so he's the one who's come back with corruption. Because we brought him back from the dead. When an attack card with Taurite is played, its owner taunts its target. Party pack, choose 1 card to add to your deck. So we can put Taurite on that card. So I'm going to put Taurite on Blinding Light. So the blue character is my tank. I'm going to put that Taurite on there, and that means that when I use this attack, it also taunts the enemy. What does the green one do? When you draw a card with Jade, draw an extra card. Okay, let's have a look. So what I would want to do with this is put it on my least used card, so that when I draw that card that I don't like very much, I get another card. Now, no, it was only reviving the downed characters, I think. That might be a wording thing for them to look at, though, if other people have found it confusing. What's the best card to put this on? I'm going to put it on an attack, just because that means that if we get a hand where we don't have enough defense in, then the attack will have a chance of drawing another defense card. Because in these games, it's usually better to have too much defense than not enough defense. Because you can just, you know, until you get later on in the game where they start to have like incredibly fast ramping enemies where you need to kill them quickly, most of the time it's better to have more defense than you need. This guy has an offering. I don't know what that means, but let's go and fight him. This is a Void Agent, which I guess is like some sort of mini-boss type thing. Scraptrix Bootkin. At the start of your turn, add a random card for your hero beside the Bootkin to your hand. It costs less this turn. What's this guy doing? I'm gonna... So we're gonna get free cards for her. It's from their library as well. So it's not necessarily the cards that we have here. It's the cards that we've unlocked in the metagame. We're going to get a free Zoria card every turn from this guy. Yeah, I really like everything I'm seeing here. It's like slightly kind of over-polished mobile art style, but I like that the characters are all slightly quirky takes on genre norms. You know, this guy's very Warcrafty. This is like the most plain dude that we have. She's kind of got some kind of moon priestess thing going on. Okay. She gains armor. We apply a weak. The weak's not going to do anything because they're not attacking yet. So let's just... do need to use the initiative up though, because that doesn't get banked. Okay. They're attacking this guy who is going to die if they do. So we'll whack some armor on him. Do some damage. What does transient mean? Remove permanently when played or at end of turn. Okay, I'm going to use that as well. Draw a card. This guy's going to be very close to death after this. He's going to get bonked on the head. Okay, this guy's going to get hit. That's going to take him down to 1. He's got his attack boosted at the moment. And if I spend strategy, then this gets an additional move. So maybe we need to do something to give him that strategy. What I can do is apply Fragile to this guy, and then that's going to give me the taunt effect. So that's transferred to her now, which is our red gem starting to do its thing a little bit. Guard her. Okay, she's only going to take 3 damage now. Yeah, still nature. I think you're right. The color. I mean, if you compare this to the game that I had on stream yesterday, the kind of Norse game where all of the card art was like going for the same grim colors, and it just meant that you couldn't tell things apart very easily. Right, they're attacking her. She's got loads of health. So this little yellow thing, this radiance, that's very similar to having like a lightning orb on the robot guy on Slay the Spire. It's just like attacking, auto-attacking every turn. Flint gains strategy and aid 1 battle order to your draw pile. Battle order, commit, upgrade this. Okay. The strategy, that little stack of scrolls is like what he uses to trigger his extra stuff. We're going to put this little guy down here. Get some extra automatic attack. This is similar to Roguebook as well, where you can summon these little minions and they like automatically attack for you, and it's like, it's kind of a strategy you don't have to use, but you can build up to. This guy's going to attack everyone for 2 damage, so he's going to go down this time. Oh no, yeah, he's still gonna get donked for that. Oh, so close. So close to taking him out without losing someone. Oh. I think maybe my minion took the damage then. Oh yeah, it's kind of shrunk down a little bit just so that the chat doesn't cover too much of the game. Marcin, so the way it works is you can bank the coloured mana for each character up to 3. So if you deliberately don't play a character's cards, you can save up the mana between rounds. It's a really neat system. I really like it. It's very intuitive. You learn it very quickly. It's like taking the best parts of a bunch of different systems and just doing what works here. Right. We'll apply weak to all the enemies so they're doing less damage now. He's still going to go down if they hit him. Maybe we put one of those in front of him. Is that going to defend him? That's going to absorb 5. Is that 5? Is the... Is that how many turns it has, or is that how much health it's going to absorb? I'm not sure. Our support is getting lots of defense this turn because he's the only one who's going to get attacked. Oh, that's not our support, that's our aggro guy. I think a thing that might be worth doing, obviously there's like a gradient highlight around them when you hover them. But because we can, it's for anyone who missed the start of this game, there's different characters that you can put in different orders. So my first run, I had this guy in the green slot, which is the support slot. And now he's in the red slot. If there's any small thing you can do on the character to make them look different depending on which sub-role they've put them in, that might be helpful for just remembering who's who, because I haven't quite got it locked into my head that it goes green, red, blue. I will get there eventually. But maybe even like putting the border of their health bar in the corresponding color or something might help me get there quicker. But I don't think it's something that matters too much in the long run. Okay, we're going to... Oh, this guy's taunting. Okay, so let's put one of those there to absorb some damage. Defend them. And this is another one of those combats where the guy at the front is taunting, so we can't deal with the one at the back that probably deals more damage until we've got rid of the taunter. They're going to keep attacking my goblin. Just defend him. I think she's supposed to be a magic tank. We're going down this turn, I think, or some of them are. Okay, we need this. We need to have more of those strategy cards because his strategy effects are really powerful. Like, he's almost like a green growth deck. Like when you build up his secondary resource of strategy, he gets like really cool stuff he can do. Bank loads of red mana between turns then. The other thing that's great about this system is it means that if you have an imbalanced deck or you're just unlucky and you don't draw cards for one color for a turn, the banking of the mana becomes like a trade, like a, you know, booby prize. Like I can't do anything with this guy this turn, but the next time I get a big card with them, I'm going to have saved up like 3 mana and I can definitely play that card. It's a really, really well designed system. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but it's, you know, it's the type of thing that matters in this sort of game. Okay, we're going to revive the heroes and then we're going to get 2 more corruption cards in our deck. So the game is getting kind of more difficult because we're loading our deck up with rubbish stuff by choosing to revive them. Craft 3, draw 1 card. So our goblin guy has this resource. They both have a similar mechanic where the goblin guy develops this stacks of scrap that allow him to do things, and the little green human dude develops stacks of strategy. But strategy seems like a big chunky resource where you use one to do a big thing, whereas scrap you kind of build up lots of it. I'm going to have to move on to the last game in a minute. This is great. I could just sit and play this for hours. I probably will at some point. We've got... I think a healing card would be a good idea. Reveal. Choose 1 to deplete. Flint gains strategy. Sounds good. Okay. 2 cards per color on your starting hand is a good idea. I mean, it could even be one of those things where that's a relic, and it's like one of the beginner learning relics you can start with, but you don't have it for the whole game. Whenever you're making a game that's about, like, collecting lots of things and creating builds and stuff, often if you can think of a helper mechanic, it's like maybe that helper mechanic doesn't need to be there all the time. Maybe it's something that is, like, an optional thing that you use to teach the game and then you take away later on. Oh, this guy's taunting again. A lot of annoying taunting enemies at the start of the game. It's got so much scrap. It kind of carries it over. It's persistent between rounds as well, whereas I think strategy maybe isn't. I'm not sure. Bonk. Yeah, this is a team of 2 that are making this. I don't have much more context. It's a Steam demo, so, you know. It's not a commercially released game, but it's not content complete yet, I don't think. Very, very good. It's not going to be a Slay the Spire 2 killer. Definitely a roguebook killer, though. Right, choose one of these to deplete. I can deplete my corruption. Huh. So the smoking a pipe card gives him his little strategy boost that you can use for something else. And you can see now this has got like a gold thing around it because it's letting me know I can trigger the secondary effect. So really, really paid lots of attention to detail in terms of the UX norms of these games. Cards that are viable, you know, they have... Cards that have like an additional thing that is viable have a gold thing. So I can see that I have enough craft on my goblin to get the additional effect from that card. I can see that I have a strategy, so when I play this, it's going to play the extra attack. It's great. And that's kind of stuff that you would just know that the game should have if you actually play these games. And it kind of shows very, very quickly when someone is working in a genre they don't understand because it doesn't have this level of attention to detail on the UX. UX here is fantastic. They've taken all of the things that would be in Hearthstone or Slay the Spire or Roguebook or whatever, all of the things that just work and which players will see and know what they mean. Like, I knew what that yellow glow around the card meant. I knew that that meant the special condition that makes this card do its secondary effect is met. You should play this card. They've taken all of those things that work from those other games. They've innovated in places where it's actually helpful and like makes the game more interesting. They haven't innovated for the sake of it on pointless things like changing the UX or whatever. Great. And here we've got like a little breakdown of how many cards we've got for each character. So I probably want to go for a blue card because I don't have... So these are neutral. That's gaining scrap. Oh no, these are all red cards. These are all for him. It's weird that they're all for the same character, but... Summons in battle, gain 5 stamina this turn. That's cool. Do one more. Look at this Gloober. That's a really interesting card. You choose a card to get rid of for the rest of that combat. And if you're deeper into the game and your characters have fallen down a lot and you've got a lot of corruption cards in your deck, you can use his little smoking break to forget the corruption. So you get rid of a bad card, but most of the time you're going to have to get rid of a good card. And then it's just like, I'm going to go get high in the middle of combat. smoking his little Bilbo Baggins pipe. Wanna go get high? Save that green mana. Quite hard to get into the habit of like not playing every card because the mana rolls over. That's like a fun little thing to have to gradually learn. It's not a bad thing. It's not like a UX problem, but it is one of those things where it's like the new mechanic, so you're going to make some errors with it early on, and that's part of the learning curve of the game, because you can play these games quite fast when you get used to them and when you're used to playing them, and I think it's testament to how well this game implements like the basic UX from those other games, that I could just get into playing it very, very fast. But then that means that these other mechanics you have to learn, like the mana rollover and stuff, you're going to make mistakes with that early on. And again, this isn't me necessarily saying that that's a bad thing, I'm just thinking out loud about my experience as I play it, because that's what this is about, really. I kind of try to say things at the point that I notice them, because then if the developer is watching this, they'll go, oh yeah, that is something that, people don't notice until they've been playing the game for an hour or so long, because they will be blind to that, because they will have designeritis and they will know their game too well. Wonderful. That was Northanda Chronicles. Wouldn't be surprised to see that show up some other time. Definitely interested in playing that one again. Let me just... The last game we're looking at today is Lootbane. Get the store page up for it. A minimalistic RPG of risk and reward where insatiable greed drives every decision. Explore shifting regions, build synergistic warbands, and descend into dangerous dungeons for legendary loot. Yeah, this looks interesting. It's got a neat little kind of retro aesthetic. Doesn't look like it's sort of directly playing off another game or anything in any way that I can recognize, and that can be an interesting, cool thing. Often it's not. Often it just means someone tried to like reinvent the wheel in a bad way, but I don't know, there's something that's quite coherent about the way this is presented that gives me some hope. Warrior, Vampire, Wizard, Ranger. Can't be a Vampire or Ranger. We can only be a Warrior or a Wizard. I'm going to be the Warrior. I want to be the Wizard, but I feel like playing it with the character that is more likely to be simpler and easier is a better way to have a good first start. Select starting ability. Sir Binklebonk. Oh. Sir Greg. Select starting ability. Oh, there is a thing. No starting ability. Okay, we don't have any of these choices yet. There was a little bit of a delay in seeing any kind of tooltips there. This is doing a nice job of showing us that the game is going to have lots of stuff in. Might be nice for some of these to be hidden or secret, but like secret in a way that you know they're there. You know, like a question mark or something. You don't lose lives, you have 3 lives. Roguelike. It's a tough one, but I always think when you're doing the early stage testing for a game, it makes sense to have these different modes and options, but at some point you have to make a choice about what the core version of your game is. I've bounced off of Caves of Qud so much trying to play it as a roguelike because it feels like that's the proper way to play the game, and I should have been playing it in the RPG mode. And it's specifically with Caves of Qud because it's like there's so much investment in building the character before you start playing, and that doesn't work for me with a roguelike where I die within 5 minutes. And I had such a better time with it once I just threw away the idea of there being a proper way to play the game that I wasn't doing. But yeah, I think avoid like launching your game with too many open at the start modes, because it communicates to a player that you don't really know what the kind of authoritative, you know, good way of play, like correct version of the game is. You don't have a very clear vision. It's great to have modes and optionality, but you often just open people up to like picking the wrong thing for them and playing that for a long time instead of just going, no, this is what the game is. Each move you can choose one event by clicking on it or using arrow keys or WASD. All events will be completed this way. Switch between stats, inventory and followers. Hover over icons to learn more. Right click to equip items. Okay. Explore cave, find gold or XP. It's a bit weird that that's called you found gold if it's an option. I'm going to explore a cave. Rooms 8, levels 1. Those buttons need to be closer to the thing they're related to. Inside the dungeon, use the same navigation as in the overworld. Track dungeon progress and loot here. Coloured icons represent your dungeon rewards. Combat rooms trigger automatic battles. Enemies attack when their attack bar fills. Okay, so we're doing most of the game through multiple choice, and then when we do a combat, we have an auto-battler. I'm going to do the WASD controls, it seems. The clicking doesn't always click in the place that you would think it would. I have a soft spot for auto-battlers, but I haven't seen a good one where you only had one character. Because they tend to be more about like the spatial thing and then the enjoyment of watching it as if you're like watching a horse race or something. Watching like a, you know, something with like a bunch of different actors in it. When you've only got one character walking around, you don't have that fun thing of like the last time I played auto battlers on a stream, I kind of noticed that the thing that was really fun about watching the combat was watching for when you knew when someone was going to win or not. Whether it was like, oh, I'm losing, oh no, you know, maybe there's a, you know, runaway button or whatever. Watching for that turning point in the combat where you know who's going to win is an enjoyable, it's an interactive part of auto battlers, and I think it's part of what people like about them. It's not obvious unless you play them, right? Just like when someone watches sport on TV, the thing that they're enjoying doing, or one of the things they're enjoying doing, is applying their judgment to try and make predictions about what's going to happen, which is what's fun about gambling on sports as well, is this kind of judgment aspect of it. Even though I'm not involved, I can use my understanding of what's going on to pinpoint this turning point in the match where someone's going to win. And I think that's part of what makes auto battlers good or not. When there's only one character on your side on the screen, I don't know how you are supposed to get that kind of enjoyment from it. It kind of removes that a little bit, because then we would need a really in-depth character situation to read for that one character, you know? Like you are going into like Tekken or Dark Souls levels of needing a character to do lots of moves and have status effects and stuff. Whereas in a traditional auto battler, it's weird to call them that because they've only been around for like 5 years or whatever, but you've got 8 units fighting 8 units, and it's very visually clear when one side is winning. Maximum hit points, sure, let's go for some of that. Yeah, lots of clunky UX stuff here. Sort of telling me to navigate with WASD, but then there's moments where I need to click. It feels like it's not very... I think generally it feels like they've tried to do too many... They've tried to accommodate too many different things. We've got too many different modes at the start of the game to choose from. Then the game is like, you can control using this, or this, or this. And I just feel like it's probably better to settle on one thing, get the game really good with that one thing, and then introduce like the alternate controls and stuff. you know, you're not a big time commercial game developer who needs to be like thinking about your Switch release from the get-go. I know there will be people who advise you to do that, but that is kind of not a sensible way of giving advice to people who are like maybe working on their first commercial game or whatever. I don't think people who are working on their first attempt at a commercial game need to worry about supporting every type of control system or localizing to 12 languages or any of those things. And it feels like this is suffering a little bit from that kind of way of thinking where it's just like, here's all the different ways you can control the game. It's like, no, just make one and make it good. That should be your focus at this stage. I'll put some armor on my guy. So I'm using WAS to choose between these three options in all of these cases. I really like the general design of this. There's just lots of jank UI stuff. Like, why are these so... Why is that up there and that is down there? I'm choosing between that and that. The buttons to do so are all the way down here, but that is supposed to map to that. And that's supposed to basically be ignore one of these things. It just feels like you don't have like a very good grasp of what it means for things to be positioned a certain way in an interface. We've always got time for horse girl races. We definitely need to have a horse games stream at some point. So this is what's going to happen when I change the stream format slightly. What we're going to do is we're going to do Indies Under the Knife on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to do it twice a week. And at least one of the games each time will be one of the things from our Patreon's Discord community. And that means that the games that you guys are making in the Discord community will be what sets the theme. So if you submit your Horse Girl game, I'm going to have to go into the big list of the 200 other games that are waiting that have been sent to the form on indiegameclinic.com. I'm going to have to find games that go with the Horse Girl game. Which means you need to everyone needs to send me more horse games. Excellent. Yeah, KP, I was thinking that every time I have streams 2 days in a row, it always makes me feel a little bit tired because there's a lot of like, I don't know, like I'm quite I'm reasonably sociable. Like I'm happy to hang out on the Discord every day and talk to people about what they're working on, but doing this is a slightly different vibe because it's just a weird way of socializing, of like kind of performing, and then there's 10 people that you're actively talking to, and then I'm also talking to the other people that are watching this as a video afterwards, and it's just a very strange headspace to be in, like multiple days a row in a week. And although like I guess I am a professional streamer on some level now, it's not like the main thing that I do. I'm gonna get inundated with Horse Girl games now. Oh man, I think fishing is the same thing for me as reading in games. Like if a game is entirely about fishing, I love it. I love Dredge. I love Dredge. Most of the time, when a game has a fishing mini game, I end up hating it, and that's because I spend most of the game like walking around with the character and exploring the world, and then the fishing minigame is like sit here and press this button, right? And it's that same, it's the chess boxing thing again, right? Like in Stardew Valley or Cult of the Lamb or any of those cozy games, most of the time I'm moving my little character around, I'm having a lasting impact on the environment by building things or fixing things. All of those little like town building games, life sims, have that quality of like I'm constantly moving around and building and directly impacting the space around me. And then you go to fish and it's just like sit here and do this quick time event, and it's not, and it's like the theme of fishing isn't the problem. The fact is that we go from a very kind of spatial exploratory game mode into this other thing, which is just like, it's basically the parrying thing again, of like if your game is just parrying, suddenly it becomes a rhythm game because There's nothing wrong with parrying as a mechanic on its own, but when the game requires it and it's the only way of dealing with a certain situation, suddenly you're going from a big decision space into just rhythm game, you must do this at exactly this moment. And it's that chess boxing thing again of like, that can be okay if it's the whole thing, but if it takes me away from another activity that's drastically different and feels jarring when it does that, you know, reading when I'm going from driving a nice ship around to reading a book, going from walking around watering my crops to just sitting there pressing a button to fish, it's just too much of a difference. Whereas like I played Reg, which is a game that is 70% about fishing and doing those little fishing mini games, and I love it. It's just a matter of things not going together, you know? And none of this is me, you know, trying to make some authoritative statement about something being bad or not. I'm trying to, like I'm always trying to do on this channel, trying to verbalize my responses to things in a way that hopefully helps other people to understand that you can do that. And yes, my experience might be shared by other people who can't articulate it, which I think is probably true. And like, if you go back to that example earlier of the story games, why is it that the deluxe story games all have this really good UX and are like a limited amount of stuff on screen at once? Because that is how they become big, by doing something to get the people who don't like that jarring, like, here's a big page of text now, to bringing them into the fold by doing something to accommodate them. But the people who didn't like Sunless Sea, but they do like an Inkle game or they do like Disco Elysium, won't necessarily have been able to articulate that thing they were experiencing, which for me is the chess boxing problem. It's just changing the modality of the game so much that it's like, I like both of these things, but I don't like them at the same time. It's actually one of the reasons why I changed the game I'm working on in the way that I did. It's just that kind of big dramatic change in modality where it's like, are both of the parts of this game going to be enjoyable for the same person? And if not, maybe it's not worth my time to do that. Right, I keep going for the healing when I've got full health, so I need to stop doing that. I think the main problem this game has is like an auto battler with one character. We've got another little guy now though, so it's starting to feel a bit more like it has the stuff an auto battler needs. But I really think the enjoyment of an auto battler is about reading the situation and being able to go, oh yeah, I can see where this is going to lose, or you know, I can see we're going to win now, I can see we're going to lose. It's one of the skills that you learn if you play something like chess or if you play Magic the Gathering. A lot of those games have like what you would call a concede culture, right? So anyone who's played one of these dueling games, whether it's chess or backgammon, or I don't know if you can concede in backgammon, I don't know, but these like high skill 1v1 games, there is a skill to learning when you're going to lose the game so that you can save time and just end the game early. And it's kind of like a point of pride. You see this in Magic the Gathering a lot. Knowing that you're going to lose and being able to concede early enough is almost like a skill in itself, where you say, okay, I've lost this match, but you can tell that I'm a very experienced player because I can see that coming early enough to concede early, right? And I think that is kind of tied to this thing of like watching a sport, judging it, and with an auto battler as well, watching an auto battler, being able to see where it's going. Because the way that this is structured, it's like we don't lose the auto battler unless it's to like totally lose the game, whereas that's not how auto battlers usually work. You usually just play lots and lots of rounds. Sometimes you get wiped out and you lose a heart or you lose whatever resource, but your guys come back and you keep going. Whereas this is like an auto battler trying to be a fill-in for like a bigger system in another type of game, and it doesn't feel like it kind of understands enough about what the enjoyment of auto battlers is. I think there's like a general point there about game design where it's like you need to understand what the little, not guilty pleasures, but like the misunderstood enjoyment of a type of game is. So in auto battlers, it is watching for the tide of battle, and I don't get that in this at all. I just feel like it's almost like a farming exercise where it's just happening, and You know, it's not dangerous enough that I'm losing very often, and even when I do, there's not enough going on the screen for me to have to like read the situation and do something about it, or not even do something about it, but get the satisfaction of being able to predict how it's going to go. So it's just not doing the thing that auto battlers do for me. There's often like some kind of hidden enjoyment that people get out of a genre of games, and if you don't play a lot of them, you don't understand what it is, or if you play them kind of unthinkingly. Like, one of the things in Slay the Spire and in the game we just played, and all of those deck building games, I get enjoyment from doing the little bits of math to work out how much defense I need or how much attack I need to do to kill someone. No one would ever like cite that in their top 5 things they like about Slay the Spire. But when you're actually playing it and you're able to become conscious of what you're actually doing and enjoying, it's really enjoyable. It's like, it's just the little moment-to-moment thing you're doing constantly. And if people didn't enjoy that, they wouldn't play the game. And I think that's a really good thing to try and look for and to develop. It's like, what's the thing that people enjoy about this game that no one really talks about because it's kind of non-obvious, or maybe it's kind of embarrassing. Like, no one would admit to being like, oh, I play the Slay the Spire because I love doing little bits of arithmetic every 20 seconds. But that is part of what people who play those games enjoy doing. So you need to kind of factor it in when you try and work out how to build one of those. Just like with an auto battler, I just feel like this isn't really tapping into what I get from one of those games. It could be doing different things. I mean, the fact that we've just talked about sort of semi-related things while I just get on with the game sort of suggests that it's maybe aiming to be a reasonably kind of casual thing that you can just do something else and sort of no brain. I also put it on the, I didn't put it on the roguelike mode where you die, but I don't think we've had a character death so far yet anyway, so maybe this is meant to feel like a kind of incremental where the chance of losing is just kind of negligible anyway. Lures versus Fishies. That's a great title. Gonna die this time. You have fallen. You lost all your gold and dungeon loot. So it was kind of like it was just too easy, dead. And like run-based dungeon crawly type games, generally, it's like you're gradually losing health through a lot of like death by 1,000 cuts, lots of small bad decisions. Here it just felt like it was just too easy every single combat, and then that one was harder because there were more guys. You found a chest. Doing a little bit of math is fun, yeah. And you need like someone that's very self-aware to be able to acknowledge that, which is why, you know, that's kind of part of your job as a game designer, is to understand those sort of hidden enjoyments that people get from your type of game. Because if you were making you know, whatever type of game it is, people often aren't going to playtest your game and go, oh, I really like doing this slightly embarrassing part of this game. And that's why like stuff like, you know, critics or just very articulate fans are good. I'm constantly encouraging people on this site to just like if you're working in a particular genre of game, you should be, you know, not necessarily sitting there watching like 100 hours of Northern Lion streaming games or whatever, but all of the content that you consume about games doesn't need to come from game developers or game designers. It can just come from very articulate fans, and that's what streamers and games journalists are. You know, if they're games journalists that work in the kind of you know, aren't in that horrible kind of corporate world where they have to just cover every big hype game, and they can actually have a taste profile and be a tastemaker and be like, hey, I'm the person that covers all the RPGs, or I'm the person that covers all the puzzle games, or I'm the person that covers all the visual novels. It's why I'm constantly trying to work out which smaller places cover particular type of things. And when we get like a very highly polished puzzle game coming through the community, at some point I'm always like, have you posted it on Thinky Games yet? Because this is like something that they will like. But when you go into those kind of places, we're going to die on this one, I think. Maybe not. Haven't taken much damage yet. But when you start to get past that whole thing of like making a game is the technical component, and into the world of making a game is like experiential, which is very hard. Like lots of people never get past that stage because they never really get to the level of technical competency where they can start caring about game design rather than just like, how do I use a game engine? Then you will eventually see the value of like, you know, listening to Northern Lion think out loud as he plays some weird little deck builder or whatever. But lots of people never really get past that technical hobbyist stage of making games into actually thinking like a game designer, because it's just too hard to learn how to make games in the first place. So, you know, game design is the difference between just learning to make a game that exists versus learning to make a game that is good. And in order to make games that are good, you need to like think about psychology and stuff like that. And the people that can talk to you about the business of making games, or the people who can talk to you about the technical side of making games, aren't necessarily the people who are the best equipped to explain to you why a particular thing is fun. Those people are often just players that have particularly high skills at articulating themselves and understanding what's going on with their own thoughts and emotions as they play a game. Drop your items here to sell them. Merge items, I don't think I have anything. Is it merging doubles? Yeah. I like what this game is doing. It feels very chill. I'm kind of glad to be playing it in the low stress, you can't really permanently die mode, I think. They've done this sound design thing of like, it has all the sound effects, but they've tried to make them feel very light, which I think is appropriate in an auto battler, because you don't want everything to be going bum bum bum, because the type of game is going for is being like chill and relaxing. I think we could have a little bit more of a kind of like some sort of snappy pop when the enemies die, because that's supposed to be a satisfying thing. And it doesn't quite have that kind of bubble wrap quality to what happens when you kill an enemy. Yeah, I'm not going to play any more of that one today. I think the key things were like the UI layout feels a bit odd. The auto battler feels strange as well, because it's just like the times I've died, that last time just felt very sudden. I think maybe putting this guy's health in the world above him would be helpful, because when I'm watching the fight, I will do one more. We'll find some more things to kill. Small group of enemies. Here we go. So when I'm watching the fight, I'm watching here, right? And you've put all of these health bars here. And normally I would say, oh, if you've only got one character, then you don't need a health bar. But it doesn't really make sense to expect the player to be reading the space here and looking at all the health bars and then looking up here for your own health. I would put the health in there. So, or in both, you know, so you can see it up there and it's in a consistent place. But when you're in combat, it's kind of following your character around, because it's all like you're asking the player to kind of look up and down and up and down and up and down. It doesn't make much difference, because I can't do anything about it when I'm going to die anyway, because we don't have any active spells or anything. Chill, but would you enjoy it without us on the side? No, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, it's not doing what I need it to do to be an engaging auto-battler, which is have a lot of decisions about builds and positioning and stuff like that. You know, the last really good auto-battler I played on this channel recently was this one. This is the one I can very strongly recommend in this genre. I think it's really important to understand what people get out of auto battlers and not just be like, oh, that's a replacement for combat in this type of game, right? Because what they tried to do in Lootbane is like make a mini kind of minimalist RPG, very kind of old school 80s dungeon crawler type RPG, and then use the auto battler to replace the combat in that. And that can be done, but it just felt like it wasn't doing any of the things that I would expect from an auto battler. So Soul's End, played this a month or so ago. I really, really like this. And the way it works is it's basically the same as a Dota Underlords. You put your characters down on the grid, the other enemies appear, the battle starts, they go into each other, they attack. You have some spells you can drop. But the way that this one works is you have these like items as well. And rather than like merging them into the characters, which is what most auto battlers have you do, it's what Underlords did, it's what Underboard did, which is like an indie game based on Underlords. Instead, you place them on the grid, and then the different items have like adjacency bonuses, and some of them will be diagonal, and some of them will be in a line. And so you have this lovely little puzzle between combats of a thing that you're doing. And I think the thing that makes auto battlers work is what you're doing between the auto battlers. It's like there is an active part of the game where you're making a lot of decisions and doing like build work, kind of theory crafting about, oh yeah, if I got this thing, and I remember last time I got that upgrade, if I get that upgrade again, then I'll be able to position these guys like this and da-da-da-da-da. Whereas the game we just played doesn't have any of that. And yeah, it's kind of like the auto battler is like, in order to have that nice kind of watching a sports game and judging what's going to happen part of the auto battler, you need to have lots of units, and then you need to have like lots of variables that play into how the tide can turn. The thing that's really great about Soul's End is it's got all of this really nice, even though it's kind of like crunchy, slightly janky pixel art, it's got loads of nice VFX for what's happening. You know, you can have like setting them on fire and giving them poison effects. It's all really nicely visually communicated. So when you get one of those turning points where it looks like it could go either way, and then you start setting them on fire, and it's like very visually clear that the tide of battle has turned. The last game we just played was just there. I have a health bar. It's not even in the right place. And when I'm going to lose the match, it's because the health bar is going down quite fast. That's not an interesting thing to watch. It's something that the outside of combat part of that game didn't give me much control over. It was just occasionally you get a skill point. Do you want to deal damage quicker? Do you want to have higher max health? That to me is not enough to really get at the auto battler juice. And the auto battler juice is, okay, you're not directly involved in this situation. These guys are going to fight on their own with their own AI, but the outcome of this fight is going to be based on the strategic decisions you made between the rounds about like which units to draft, where to place them, which items to give them. That is what makes the genre work. It's not just a replacement for like another type of combat. It's its own thing. If it doesn't have all of those components, it doesn't work. That's kind of how I see that. Spicy Bread said, I've seen people say auto battlers are kind of dead genre these days, that the trend is over. I wonder if that's true, or if there's just a lot of games in the genre that don't get it. I think that's true every time this happens. And I think even just thinking of things in terms of trends leads to that. I don't really believe in trends. And that's not me trying to be like idiosyncratic or contrarian. I just don't think that's how things work. I think what happens is people make something good from first principles because they play certain types of games and they have a good idea and then they execute it. People see that that's successful, like unimaginative people that don't really know how things are made, see that thing's successful, they copy it in droves. People think there is a trend happening. There was a big one of these and then all of these other smaller ones, and some of them were good. Oh, people seem to like those now. that's not, I don't think that's how the games market works. I think people have relatively consistent tastes over time, and sometimes a person who likes certain types of games will have more games made for them, and other times they will be an underserved audience, and that means they're just waiting for like a particular type of game to come out again, and then they'll be happy again. I don't think trends are a thing. I think there are good games and bad games, and the types of people that like can't make something good for out of like their own set of preferences and stuff, and are always kind of looking to follow something, and that leads to the situation you've described, is that you end up with a lot of games in a genre that don't really get that genre. That's because the genre becomes inundated with people who are like in it because they think it's like a shortcut to success, right? They go, oh, I need to make one of those now, that's trending. None of the games that do well in that area will be games that have been made because someone thought, oh, this is trending, I need to make one of those. It will be games that have been made because someone had a passion for a particular type of game. Like a really good example of this, that kind of the folly of that type of thinking, I think, was, what was it? Was it called Little Tree Kingdom that we played the other week? Right, this is such a good example of that. And I after we'd played this on stream, and I was like, you know, very mixed about this. It's visually beautiful, looks great, doesn't really understand cozy games or deck builders, right? So they've made a game. You can see the tick boxes in this description. They've gone, deck builders are hot right now, cozy games are hot right now, and they haven't understood that cozy games are casual games, and they've made something that's way too complicated to make most cozy gamers happy, and they've made something that doesn't like obey any of the established rules of how deck builders work. And it's just an example of this like keyword, jumping on the thing, not understanding the thing from a fan's perspective. I dug into this a little bit. It's an Indonesian studio. I don't know how many people work there, but this isn't like an indie project in the way that most of us would understand it. That's why there's like a separate studio from the publisher name. And it's an example of like the extremes of this sort of thing, of the kind of trend chasing thing. That when people start chasing a trend, the trend doesn't actually exist. I think that's the way I see it. They perceive a trend and they start chasing it, but the thing they're chasing isn't actually a trend. It's like the tale of success of 2 or 3 games that they've managed to mentally lump together, and those games might not have even been made in relation to each other, right? The trend gets fabricated after the fact. It happens with music scenes as well. Like, you know, the Seattle grunge scene that Nirvana and Pearl Jam and stuff were part of, that wasn't something that the artists saw themselves as existing in or being part of. It was created by journalists. It was created by like the consumption culture outside of the thing. And I think, I know some of this is just because like the type of person I am, and I will bias towards this side, but I think that the people that make really good games just don't think that way at all. They don't go, oh, I need to make this thing because there's a trend, you know? It is like, so for example, I've been playing Omelette You Cook. We're playing it for one more run, like the next episode of our podcast, which is about different run-based games. We're doing Omelette You Cook. This game, you could call it a Balatro-like, because it has multiplier-based scoring, and like you get really big scores by stacking these multipliers and stuff. I don't think that is part of a trend that we should call Balatro-likes. I think what is happening there is designers are realizing the value of scores and multipliers in games. And now what will happen is we'll like boil this down to, oh, it's all like Balatro. Everyone's copying Balatro. It's like, no, like what has happened is a particular successful game has unearthed something we previously already knew, right? You could call Balatro a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater like, because they both have scores and multipliers in. It's kind of re-dug up something from games history that we kind of already knew worked and just applied it in a new way. And the games that come after that will be good examples of games won't be made because someone was directly copying Balatro or chasing a trend, because I don't think creative people think in terms of trends. I've worked with enough like brands and marketing companies to know that the people that do good stuff aren't the people who think in terms of trends. That's like a baby-brained way of thinking about media and fandoms, I think. Yeah, Balatro likes are just engine builders, exactly. Josh Brycer did a video about that over on Gaming Wisdom recently. He has a slightly different take on it because he doesn't like them. He doesn't like the randomness and the fact that it's just the outcome of your engine. I quite like that. I think the strategic judgment to like try and build the engine up so that it becomes the broken build and makes the big numbers, I quite enjoy that. It's what I like about auto battlers. It's why that last auto battler didn't hit for me, because we weren't doing enough of that. Where's the sort of early adopter curve thing? Sorry, don't know if you've ever seen this diagram. This is like a helpful way of thinking about this stuff as well. So this is an article about how this is wrong or not, or needs, you know, complicating. Have you ever seen this diagram before? So this is kind of like the pattern of how many people are in each stage of something becoming big. Laggards. Yeah, it sounds really insulting, isn't it? You're such a laggard. So the idea is when something becomes big, whether it's an individual media thing or an entire like genre of things, it goes through this process. And the majority of people are not actually involved in the thing that starts to make the thing big, right? So what happens is at this end, you get the innovators who are the tastemakers who like that thing for its own reasons. And this is an interesting thing because in terms of video games, if you think of like the first 5 people who playtest your game, they'll be the innovators and the early adopters. So they're also the people that can see past like the fact that your game is grey box or whatever. And they're the people who can like play the game and see its full potential even when it's not finished. And that's why you have to be careful with those people sometimes, because they will give you certain false signals about some things in your game that need to be more accessible and stuff, because they'll be super hardcore. That's why you have to be very careful with stuff like early access as well, because your early access players will want things that aren't actually representative of 90% of your audience, but you should still listen to some of them because they're the hardcore of your audience. And who's going to be in that hardcore of your early adopters and your innovators? It will be the games journalists, it will be the other developers, it will be all of the people that initially get the word out about your game. And that means that those are the people that decide whether the game actually becomes big enough to include these other people, right? If this initial how big is that percentage when we put it all together? If this initial 16% of early adopters and innovators, if it doesn't pass through them and impress them, it doesn't get to the rest, right? And this is why all of the stats that you hear about how shocking it is that there are so many games and there are 50 new games on Steam every day are kind of irrelevant, because 90% of those games aren't good enough to get through this first stage, because the early adopters are, generally speaking, going to be the people that have a higher need for novelty. They're also going to be the people that are the sickos for that genre of game, which is why, you know, when we get a game like the deck builder I played a minute ago, I am gushingly enthusiastic about it because I play so many that are not good and don't deserve to pass through this stage. But what's interesting about this model and this chart is when something does become big and it gets through that initial red and orange testing phase, now the majority of the people that are engaging with it are not part of this anymore, and they are like the people to whom it is a trend, right? So the people in the red and orange segment at the start are interested in this thing for its unique qualities, and then it becomes perceived as part of a trend, and then everyone else is like, oh, I need to play this because it's hot right now. And it's the same with every type of any kind of thing to do with fashion or media trends. It's the same sort of thing. There are people who are leaders and people who are followers. The people who are the leaders act as the valve to decide what gets out to the followers, But then what happens in terms of general perception is the followers who make up the majority think that what's happening is like a wave of trend, when actually something has been curated further along the line. So we get this perception of a trend happening. And I would say to everyone, like mainly to you guys, to people who watch this channel, you are not supposed to be thinking like these people out here. It is not your job to try and make the next McDonald's or the next like big mass media product. We are indie media creators. We are in the business of making unique, specific, bespoke things. And that basically means making something that's very focused on giving a particular type of experience. And that usually means with working with your own strengths and passions and the things that you're generally interested in, right? So I can't remember who it was in the chat earlier. Is it Pepper who you know, I was saying all that stuff about mixing narrative and card games, and Pepper was like freaking out and going, "Oh no, my game is doomed. You have made me see the error of my ways." Right. That could be one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is you are now the specialist person who recognizes that there's this design problem that exists, that you can't tell a story very well in a card game. So instead of like abandoning that project, you kind of take it on as like, this is the thing I'm going to become an expert in. I'm going to really drill down into this project, into this problem, this design problem, and make it work. And that is how you make something kind of uniquely weird that is more likely to get picked up by one of these innovators. Because what these innovators want, in order to take your game or your fashion item or whatever and pass it through here, is for it to like satisfy their need for a novel take on something they already like, right? And I think that's just why it's really, really important to not think of games in terms of trends, because it's just not how it works. Even like the recent stuff with incremental games, like, you know, Bite Me's been doing videos about incremental games. Obviously, Thornity and Aramis's incremental game did really well. That's because it's a casual genre of game. If you go from doing a type of game that is not very accessible to a type of game that's more accessible, of course the numbers are going to go up. That isn't some sort of like Matrix hack thing that, oh, we've suddenly hit gold because we've noticed this trend happened. Go on, let's go and look on the I did this the other day. Go on the store, we'll go on incremental. Which games are on the front page of the incremental games genre? Hang on, if I go onto one of these and click on automation or something like that, I can guarantee there will be games on here that have been out for 10 years. Adventure Capitalist, that's been 2015, right? That's an 11-year-old game. So in terms of Opus Magnum, that's a, you know, that's a totally different, that's like a Factorio, like, oh, that's a new one, okay. But the fact that Adventure Capitalist, we're being told that there is a trend towards popularity of incremental games. One of the games on this page is like an 11-year-old game. Clicker or idler. Yeah, I mean, let's do the same thing. I bet we'll still do this thing because it's not a trend. It's just a thing people like and have always liked because it's like simple and it scratches a certain niche. So if we go on clicker and idler, we've got much more newer ones. But it's still kind of like the same thing. It's like, this is a thing that has been around for a long time. We're not suddenly seeing loads of these because people have started liking them. People like them for the same reasons they liked them 11 or 12 years ago, right? There's just like different audiences for things. And like the, I think what happens a lot in this space as well is you get a lot of kind of dude bro programmery types who wouldn't initially think of making a casual game because it's not what personally excites them. They like complex games or they like high skill ceilings because that's the kind of psychology that you have if you're the sort of person that goes into programming. So they just don't think of making like a very relaxed idle game. So when they realize that people like those, it just seems like some big free money hack when actually it's just understanding that other people have different psychology from you and like to do different things when they play video games, you know? Cookie Clicker has been around longer than a venture capitalist, yeah. So That says 2021, so this has got to be like a remake, right? Because this is older than Adventure Capitalist. But it's just an example of how you can perceive something as being a trend. I think the problem that I really have with seeing things as trends is it's like treating them like the weather. You know, it's like it's just this force that's out there. Like this thing is happening, and I need to quickly get on it and like ride it. And I don't think that's what's really happening, ever. You know, there's always a market for every sort of game. And when we get inundated with a particular type of game, it's because people have just kind of. Sometimes it's because people think, oh, that's easy. So they make a million Vampire Survivors games, and most of them aren't good because they've like underestimated how easy those games are to do well. That happens a lot. Hokupo, I don't have any access to know why your messages might not be showing up. I have very few muted words on this channel, but if you're posting about AI, then you're going to get automatically muted by the filter because I've filtered out every single word to do with GPTs or AI because I'm sick of people talking about it because it's a boring topic of conversation. Because so many of the people that come into the chat and talk about AI are like trying to encourage myself and other people to use it. And it's like, I'm beyond trying to convince people not to use these tools now. If they want to, it's totally fine. But it's just the evangelical trying to encourage everyone else to do it thing that's really irritating, you know? Most of us do our hobbies because we like them and we enjoy them and we find it a good use of our time, not because we want the outcome. We don't want to like efficiency max our crafts and hobbies. So the only thing I could think about is if your messages aren't showing up is that you're posting about something that is muted. But the only topic that is heavily muted is there's actually I'll show you my muted words because it's funny. Where do I go to look for my muted words? Where will I find it? Settings? What's it under? So the only words that are blocked on our chat are AI, Gen, GPT, and Gervais. I'm sick of people telling me that I look or behave like Ricky Gervais. Even if it's true, I just don't find it very complimentary. That's mainly because I don't like the dude's politics. I don't really care if I look or sound like Ricky Gervais, which I know is a very Ricky Gervais thing to say. Look, there's more than one acerbic autistic British man with a beard in the world, okay? I'll just it's such a Ricky Gervais thing to have a filter on. Yeah, it is. But yeah, I can't think of any other reason why you would be getting filtered out. We had to ban the AI chat just because people are so evangelical about it. It's the same that people were like about Bitcoin and metaverse, and they get so excited about the technology that they can't see that other people just don't have a use case for it. But I just, you know, I do this craft because I enjoy it. It's great to be able to make a living out of making games, but I would do it anyway, even if I couldn't. If I couldn't make games or teach making games, I would still be doing it. So people that don't want to do it and want a machine to do it are just alien to me. And it's fine if you want to do that. I mean, I would rather people didn't because of the other ethical issues with it. But it's just the telling people that they should do it, you know. If you want someone else to like make love to your partner, that's your own business, but you don't need to go around telling everyone else they should do it, because we like doing things ourselves. I wonder what words Hokupo did use. Maybe they're just generally banned YouTube words. Did you say something like Google is the great Satan or something? Boiling frogs recruiting each other to the pot. Yeah, that's exactly it. The Boiling Frog Pot Party. That's my new studio name. I need to get a new mic arm. This is really intent on falling over today. Okay, we're going to add NFT. Going to add crypto. I mean, the problem is if you manage to make a comment that has all of those words, we won't know that you did. We'll have no evidence. I can't believe you would say Balatro is not like Tony Hawk. Okay, we're going to end the stream on a proper comparison. Okay, so there's Balatro over there. Go. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. No commentary. Here we go. Put that in theatre mode as well, and then put it over here. I don't know how you can tell me that this isn't basically the same game. It's the same game. It's the same thing. And now, just to do a proper fair test, it's the same game. I don't know what you mean. I call this method kinetic mood boarding. I feel like if you made this is like a new method that we're gonna. If you do this, you just inundate yourself with footage from 4 games, and in some sort of VR helmet, and then I think maybe you will just come up with a game. Dawn said whoever's playing this is awful. Which one? Which one is awful? It's very impressive that you can judge this Tony Hawk player, this Balatro player, and this Omelette You Cook player all at the same time. I find that impressive. Herman, this is what we're doing on the channel now. We're just, we're just looking at the same game 3 times. This is peak YouTube. This is, is it accurate to say they're the same metagame with a different core mechanic? I think it's not inaccurate to say that, and this is kind of... I did that genre video a little while ago where I was talking about this, where I think a thing that a lot of people go wrong on is they start with a sort of meta genre, like Balatro, or like Souls-likes, or like roguelikes, and they don't really know what the core gameplay is, and that means that it's like you're kind of, you know, you're aiming for the mountain and you don't really know how to like even walk up a hill yet. I think most of the time, if someone's reasonably new to game development, it's much better to start on the core mechanics, find some fun little pleasing interaction, and then work out what the scoring and progression of that game is later. And that means you don't need to know whether your game is like a score chasing Balatro-like, or a deck builder, or a roguelike where you know, collect things between runs, or any of that stuff, until you know like the basic kind of toy factor of the game is there, and like you've made something that is fun for 3 minutes. Because those other metagame things, like how you score and all of that kind of stuff, how you score, how you progress, how you build up resources over time, they're important, but they're not important for you to settle on before you just know why someone will play your game for 3 minutes, because they don't answer the design question of why would someone play this game in the first place. They answer the design question of, once someone enjoys this game, why would they play it for longer, right? So you've got your baseline genre should tell you what you're actually doing moment to moment, and your base genre should tell you why you want to play the game for 3 minutes, and then your meta genre is there to tell you why someone who enjoyed the game for 3 minutes would continue to enjoy it in an hour or in 10 hours or whatever. Oh, amazing. I really appreciate that, Woody. Woody said you used that genre video for a team chat that helped. I really appreciate it when people say stuff like that, because I have such bad imposter syndrome about doing Games Ed stuff. Because it's like, even though... Like, I've done stuff that on paper is reasonably impressive, but the more you do, the more it's like... I think you have this belief that other people, whether it's someone kind of reasonably experienced like myself, or someone super experienced like Tim Kaine, you have this idea that they are just like super certain because they've absorbed all this knowledge and now they know how things work. And it's not really that. I think what a kind of mark of seniority in any sort of professional field isn't actually that you know a bunch of stuff and you've internalized it and you remember it. It's more that you've got more comfortable with uncertainty. And it's like, okay, we don't really know what we're doing here. There's no way to know for sure, but here are some like methods and ways of thinking about the problem that will make us a little bit more certain. But we're never going to be totally certain, right? And I think it's very easy to spend a long time veering away from like doing the things that would make you a good designer or a good whatever, because you think the goal is to just learn as many facts about the proper way of doing things or whatever before you can start making decisions. And it's like, no, you just start making decisions and mess up and learn, just like this young man falling over on the skateboard here. You know, we learn better by failure than by anything else. And the thing that makes that hard in a team context is you need everyone to be on board with that. You need everyone to understand that we are going to throw away half of your work. I worked with a team of very junior artists once who were we had to have a proper conversation about it once, but they were complaining that the brief from the client kept changing and they had to redo work, and I was just like, that's how client work works. You have to redo things. And no one had ever had an explicit conversation with them about the fact that we only get things right by getting them wrong a bunch of times. You know, it's like it's the Edison quote about, you know, how does it feel to have failed to invent the light bulb 1,000 times? It's like, well, I just discovered 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. It's that kind of thing. You have to kind of see it all as good XP. But it's very validating to hear when people are finding this stuff useful, because the volume of stuff I get from... I know it's generally speaking... Sometimes it's people that do know what they're talking about, but 3/4 of it is just like people who have swallowed the programmer Kool-Aid and think that because this isn't a channel about game engines that I don't know what I'm talking about, kind of thing. But I get quite a lot of like negative response to what I'm doing, and like, how, you know, you can't even do XYZ. Why do you think you can tell people about this? And it's like, well, I don't know anything more about what makes games fun or not than a reasonably articulate player, and the kind of value of what I do isn't in like knowing some magic hack that's going to make you successful. It's just in giving people ways to think about and articulate what makes games interesting or not. So whenever anyone is like, yeah, my team found this useful or whatever, or I use this to kind of educate some people and get us over some problem we were having in our team, then that's incredibly helpful for me psychologically, because even when people are kind of like constantly bombarding you with like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, like, how dare you do this, that, the other, even if you kind of know they're wrong and they're coming from a position of ignorance, it still kind of gets to you on some level. So that's just kind of a general thing to, you know, when you have nice things to say about people, say them, because they probably need you to say them. Yeah, thank you, Woody. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I think we should try this as a thing, just like a... What's it called? Like the opposite of a sensory deprivation tank. Just put 5 games on and sit and meditate while all of the points go up, and then see what happens. I can't say anything good is going to happen from it, but it's kind of funny. And I like the implication that it could work for someone. And then it'll become a trend, and all of the copycat people will be like doing this and achieving nothing. The Subway Surfers game ideation methodology. You know who doesn't have self-doubt? Dictators, yeah. Talking confidently is its own skill. Yeah, and again, I say it every time, but this is why the being patron funded is so helpful and so beneficial. And it's actually really funny, because the people that get annoyed by certain things I do on this channel really kind of think that the YouTube metrics are really, really important. So, you know, if I put something up that's slightly woke and people get pissed off about it and they announce they're leaving the channel, I'm never watching your stuff again. And it's just like, you're not... You're like one person in tens of thousands of people that add up to... in a month, the people that watch this channel, in terms of views, add up to like 1/3 of my rent over the course of a month. The people that don't really want to be a part of a community really, really overvalue themselves and think that it's all about the kind of YouTube and the amount of views things gets and stuff like that, rather than it being about making some... It's kind of coming back to that early adopters versus mass conversation from earlier. you know, I don't expect everyone who likes and supports this channel to watch every stream live, because not everyone can do that. Not everyone wants to do that. There's only certain streamers I watch for any amount of time. Like, I appreciate hanging out with you guys. It's very interesting to me that we get like 70 people in a stream, and then like 1,000 more people will watch the VOD of the same thing. But the people that kind of follow this channel in much more of a like having an ongoing communal relationship with not just me but with each other, like you guys show up, you say hello to each other in the chat. To me, that's like the model of who this is for, and everyone else is kind of like watching through the window. So it's very funny when people are like, you know, tell me how to make content or tell me what to do or not, and then I click on their little avatar on YouTube and it shows me that they've never engaged with my content before, and it's like, oh, okay, so you're the expert here on what I should do, even though you're not actually like a member of this community and you've never commented on anything I've ever done before, but here you are to tell me what I should talk about, what I shouldn't talk about, how much I should talk about different things, all of this kind of stuff. It's very, very funny. I think every walk of life has this type of person, but it's very, very pronounced in slightly more macho, technocentric kind of fields, because you just get that kind of guy. Yeah. I get people frequently like apologize for not watching everything I do, and I don't think, if anything induces that kind of guilt, you need to like not feel that way, because it's just not good. It's not good. Like I said, if it's like second screen stuff while you're doing something else, totally fine. But I hate the idea that people would be like consuming this content for 10 hours a week and then not making their game or something. I listen to a lot more podcasts than I do watch videos. Or I watch videos with just the sound because I'm doing something else like cooking. I find that's like quite a healthy way to engage with stuff. But I don't think anyone should ever feel like, oh, I'm missing out by not constantly being in this place watching this thing. I think I will probably try and do more edits of stream stuff that is useful. I feel like today we had a really helpful ramble about I'm going to have to go back and look because I can't remember what it was, but the stuff about the chess boxing problem and reading in games, I think that might be worth an edit down. But I'm gonna hop off now and put the timestamps in for the games so you can go and check them out in your own time. And just remember, everything is Balatro if it has a multiplier. That's what I would say. Thanks. Have a good rest of the day. I'll see you soon.